Chapter 4876. Sumu goes out of the elevator and sees a young and beautiful secretary standing at the elevator door. Miss Su, President Qin is in a meeting. Please go to his office and wait for him. Sumu nods and then follows the secretary to Yi Xiangnan's office. The office of the President of Stars Entertainment is naturally large and luxurious. The sunshine is warm. The second secretary is very polite. Miss Su, please sit down. I'll help you pour some tea. Coffee, black tea, or plain water? Sumu smiles. Plain water is fine, thank you. The second secretary nods and walks out briskly. Soon she comes back with a very beautiful cup in her hand and puts it in front of Sumu. President Yi has asked Lawyer Qin to come over and have a look at the document first. President Yi can sign it after the meeting. Sumu suddenly looks up. The second secretary doesn't think there is anything wrong with her abrupt behavior. She still smiles politely. Miss Su. Sumu closes her eyes slightly. Thank you. The second secretary goes out and feels that there is something wrong with Miss Su. After she leaves, Sumu is not in the mood to look at the luxury around her. She just sits quietly. She is a little ashamed and angry. For example, all the things between her and Yi Xiangnan are exposed in front of others. Yi Xiangnan doesn't care, but Sumu cares. She is just an ordinary person. But she can't resist. The gap between her and Yi Xiangnan is too big. Sumu has a better psychological balance. It's good that there is someone to take care of Cymbidium chinense after marriage. After all, in the past, she was alone with her child. All she thought about was surviving. She never had the chance to think about other things on a spiritual level. Sumu adjusts her mentality. At this time, Lawyer Qin also comes over. As soon as he comes over, he smiles slightly. Sorry to keep you waiting, Miss Su. The identity of the lawyer is special. Sumu stands up and says, Hello, Lawyer Qin. Lawyer Qin has a good first impression of Sumu. Although she is a little ordinary, she looks very decent and polite. Old people are not as strict about appearance as young people. Lawyer Qin makes a gesture. Miss Su, please sit down. He also sits down with a familiar posture. He thinks that since he can do this for Yi Xiangnan, he must have a good relationship with the Yi family. The second secretary also drinks a cup of snow-top oolong for Lawyer Qin and then leaves gracefully. Only Sumu and Lawyer Qin are left in the big office. Lawyer Qin takes out a document from the file and hands it to Sumu. Miss Su, this is a prenuptial agreement. Miss Su, please. You, he says. You. Of course, Sumu wouldn't say that there was no problem. After all, Lawyer Qin had carefully prepared it. It would be disrespectful to refuse to read it. Therefore, she read it carefully. This is a prenuptial agreement. It is quite detailed and not too harsh. At least, it is much better than what she expected. In addition to the shares of Stars Entertainment that don't belong to her, Yi Xiangnan also gives her about 2 properties and a few storefronts. There is even a picture album with some jewelry on it. Sumu has only seen these on TV. She is stunned for a moment. Lawyer Qin kindly explains, these are almost all the jewelry of the Yi family. Miss Su, please take good care of them in the future and wear them when you attend some important events. Sumu looks down. I don't think I need it. She doesn't feel inferior. She just feels that she and Yi Xiangnan are from different worlds. He should have a secretary to accompany him to the events. Chapter 4877. Just as she was thinking about it, Yi Xiangnan came over after the meeting. His gaze landed on Sumu as he asked indifferently, What do you think? He sat down next to Lawyer Chen and started chatting with him. They didn't talk about the agreement, but about something else. Sumu couldn't get a word in edgewise, so she just sat there quietly. About 5 minutes later, Yi Xiangnan seemed to remember Sumu's existence. Is there anything you want to add? Sumu had been waiting for him to say that. She pursed her lips and said softly, it doesn't say how the Cymbidium Chinense will be divided if we divorce. Divorce? Yi Xiangnan frowned and looked at her. He said firmly, I've never thought about divorce. Sumu, you'd better not think about it either. Lawyer Chen felt that the lack of oxygen wasn't quite right, so he coughed lightly. Although they weren't married because of love, they should at least treat each other with respect. No wonder they wanted to divorce. Yi Xiangnan glanced at Lawyer Chen and said calmly, I understand. Lawyer Chen touched his nose. Have a good talk. I'll leave first. Yi Xiangnan walked him to the door, which showed how much he respected this elder. He turned back and looked at Sumu. Any other opinions? Sumu lowered his gaze. After a while, he said softly, I think I should add that one. Yi Xiangnan smiled coldly. He sat opposite her and looked at her face unkindly. Then we don't need to get married. He paused and said, Sumu, do you think there's any point in writing that clause? The Cymbidium Chinense would never follow her. Whether they got married or divorced, the Cymbidium Chinense was already Yi. His hidden meaning made Sumu's expression change. She didn't speak for a long time. Yi Xiangnan stared at her for a while and said slowly, sign it. It will only be good for you. There are some things that you can't think of. Sumu pursed her lips and looked at him. To me, Cymbidium Chinense is the most important. Yi Xiangnan snorted softly in a mocking tone. She understood what he meant. For an ordinary person like her, he wouldn't care about small emotions. She could do nothing but sign it. Sumu lowered his head and signed his name without hesitation. Yi Xiangnan stared at her for a while. He wasn't sure if he saw a trace of tears in her eyes. If so, why was she crying? Wasn't it good to fly up the branches? Wasn't it good to live in luxury? Sumu's voice was very light. I want to work. Please don't stop me, Mr. Yi. Obviously, Yi Xiangnan was unhappy. He didn't have so much time to tangle with her. But he gave in at last. As long as it doesn't affect the Cymbidium Chinense, it's up to you. Besides, you are not allowed to work overtime. Because the child needed someone to accompany him, there was an aunt at home during the day. She would go to school in the future, but she had to take care of her son at night. Sumu nodded. Thank you, Mr. Yi. You're welcome. I didn't do anything for you. Yi Xiangnan was a little cold. After saying that, he seemed to want to say something. But after thinking for a long time, it seemed that he had nothing to say to her. So he packed up the documents and stared at her for a few seconds. Sumu knew that it meant that he wanted her to leave, so she got up. Goodbye, Mr. Yi. Are you going to call me Mr. Yi all the time? We're going to get married soon. Yi Xiangnan suddenly said. Sumu was stunned. She didn't think about changing. Chapter 48-78. She and he were still strangers. Call me by my name in the future. Don't call me Mr. Yi in front of others. It's impolite. Yi Xiangnan requested directly. As for how she should call him, of course, it was Yi Xiangnan. He didn't want her to call him Xiangnan either. It wasn't that close. Sumu nodded. Okay. She thought she would avoid calling him that in the future. It would be better this way. When she left, Yi Xiangnan sat directly behind the desk and the second secretary sent her downstairs. The second secretary was quite good at dealing with people. Even if Miss Su wasn't CEO Ye's favorite, she had a trump card and a son in her hands. She would become Mrs. Yi immediately. She was the rightful owner, so she had to curry favor with her appropriately. The second secretary had always been very polite. She was beautiful but not flirtatious. Even a plain person like Su Mu had a good impression of her. The second secretary sent her to the first floor and didn't return to the front desk until she saw Su Mu get in the car. The receptionist saw her and asked mysteriously, "Secretary Xiao, do you have any news?" Secretary Xiao smiled. "It's similar to the rumors, but it's not as bad as we thought. At least she's a good person. And I think Lawyer Qin said that CEO Yi wouldn't divorce her. So don't take sides randomly. You all know who's in charge of Star's Entertainment in the future. The younger one will probably inherit the family business in 10 years. We haven't retired yet, right?" The receptionist immediately understood. A mother's status depended on her son. After saying that, Secretary Xiao went upstairs with satisfaction. Su Mu drove back to the villa and went to the mall with Cymbidium Chinense for the whole afternoon. She didn't want to spend Yi Xiangnan's money, but Cymbidium Chinense had to buy something. In the end, she bought clothes and toys for Cymbidium Chinense, but she didn't buy anything for herself. After sending Cymbidium Chinense back to the villa, she went back to her previous apartment and packed up her things. She put the things that she could bring back in the car and took them to the villa. She got rid of the things that she didn't need and checked out of the apartment. It was already 7:00 in the evening when she returned to the villa. When the car stopped, she was surprised to find that Yi Xiangnan was back. His Bentley was on the parking lot. Su Mu bit her lower lip, got out of the car, and pulled out a large suitcase from the trunk. As soon as he entered the hall, he saw Auntie Wang and Auntie Chen looking disgusted, and Auntie Wang even gloated. Sure enough, while accompanying Cymbidium Chinense, Yi Xiangnan coldly scolded, "Why did you bring these things here? Didn't I pay for them?" He could not say that he was nitpicking. It was just that they had different ideas. Carrying the suitcase, Su Mu went upstairs and said softly, "These things can be used. Why should I throw them away? Besides, I am used to my previous life, and I don't want to change it all at once." Yi Xiannan was gently pushed back by her. Displeased, she snorted softly, "Sounds like you have quite the personality." Su Mu bit her lower lip, ignored him, and went upstairs directly. She had a good habit of storing things, so she went downstairs after packing up her things. Unexpectedly, the dinner at home had been eaten. Auntie Wang and Auntie Chin cleaned up the leftover dishes, leaving no fish bones for her. Of course, Cymbidium Chinense didn't know anything. She was happy with Yi Xiangnan's company. Su Mu knew her status here. She didn't have the face to ask other auntie to cook for her, so she went to the kitchen and cooked a bowl of noodles. Chapter 4879. Updated quickly, no pop-up window, free to read. It was a very simple vegetable and shredded pork noodles. The vegetables were green, and the shredded pork was very finely chopped. A few drops of sesame oil would be very fragrant. When she took it out, Yi Xiangnan couldn't help but look at her, and then moved away as if nothing had happened. Su Mu finished eating quietly, as if she was still in her own small apartment. The two aunts didn't exist for her, and neither did Yi Xiangnan. She finished eating and cleaned up. Yi Xiangnan was a little sleepy after playing for a whole day. He immediately went over and hugged her leg. "Mom, I want to sleep." Su Mu picked up his little body. "Mom will give you a bath, okay?" Then she easily picked up Cymbidium Chinense, nodded to Yi Xiangnan, and went upstairs. Auntie Wang and Auntie Chin had been there all the time. At this time, they whispered, "Miss Su is really strong. Yes, it seems easy for her to carry the young master. The suitcase just now is not light. Her arm strength is also amazing." Yi Xiangnan frowned and glanced at them. They suddenly stopped talking. "In the future, you will do the trifles of Cymbidium chinense." In Yi Xiangnan's mind, Mrs. Yi needed to cultivate her temperament. Just as Auntie Wang and Auntie Chin said, Su Mu was very strong. Great strength was definitely not an advantage for a rich lady. After Yi Xiangnan finished speaking, Auntie Wang argued, "Miss Su said that when she was at home, she took care of Cymbidium chinense. She refused to take care of Cymbidium chinense when we were at home, as if she was afraid that someone else would take her son away." Auntie Chin next to her pulled her sleeve, indicating that she should stop talking. This Auntie Wang was so confused. Auntie Wang didn't say anything. Yi Xiangnan went upstairs and went straight to the children's room. However, when he heard Cymbidium chinense's happy laughter at the door, he didn't go in. Cymbidium chinense's laughter was very relaxed. It was obvious that it was very happy to be with Su Mu, happier than ever. Perhaps, Cymbidium chinense's happiness could not be bought with money. He really needed his mother. This was also the reason why he had to marry Su Mu. He couldn't let his son be without a mother and have a psychological defect. Yi Xiangnan left and went straight to the master bedroom. He took a shower. Originally, he wanted to go to the study, but he changed his mind. He put on his bathrobe and lay on the bed reading a magazine. The lights in the bedroom were off, leaving only a reading lamp on the bedside table. When Su Mu came back from next door, she saw such a scene. She was stunned for a moment, not understanding what Yi Xiangnan meant. Of course, she still stayed at the door and didn't go in. "I'll sleep with Cymbidium chinense. Come here." Yi Xiangnan's voice was faint, but it was a little domineering. Su Mu's face was a little pale, and her voice was slightly trembling. "Mr. Yi. Just call me Yi Xiangnan. Otherwise, it will be very weird." He looked back at the magazine. "Go take a shower. I have a meeting tomorrow, so I can't stay up too late." Su Mu didn't move. He looked up. "Do you understand what I mean?" Of course she understood. But she was not very willing. Yi Xiangnan smiled slightly. "Do you want me to come over?" Su Mu took a step back, as if she was scared. Then she rushed into the dressing room like a rabbit. She was holding a nightgown. She was very scared. She wasn't ready to live with him, but Yi Xiangnan's meaning was obvious. She didn't know why he liked her. She knew that she was not good-looking. He could have many women. Chapter 4880. Yi Xiangnan was probably unhappy with her procrastination. He got out of bed and walked over. He crossed his hands at the door and looked at her quietly. "Su Mu, you are not a little girl anymore." Of course, Su Mu knew that she was just not ready. She held the pajamas in her hand for a long time before she raised her eyes. Yi Xiangnan looked at her. Su Mu said softly, "I'm going to take a shower." He looked at her again and went back to the bedroom. This time, Yi Xiangnan did not read the magazine. Instead, he roughly read the next day's work. About 10 minutes later, Su Mu came out of the bathroom. She wasn't wearing slippers, and she was only wearing cotton pajamas. She slowly walked towards him. Yi Xiangnan put down the phone in his hand and looked at her quietly. Su Mu bit his lips so hard that he almost bled. She carefully sat on the edge of the bed, hesitated for a moment, and reached out to turn off the bedside lamp. Yi Xiangnan did not object, nor did he say anything. He did not like to talk to her, especially at this time. Early in the morning, when Sumu woke up, it was already 8 o'clock. The curtains of the French windows were pulled open, and the sunlight shone in. It was a little dazzling. She sat up, scratched her messy hair, and wanted to see Cymbidium chinense. At this time, the door of the dressing room opened, and Yi Xiangnan came out. Seeing that she was awake, his eyes fell on her. The slightly burning gaze made Sumu very uncomfortable. They were actually still strangers. She did not know why he suddenly. Sumu looked down to see if there was anything wrong with her. At this time, Yi Xiangnan had already said in a low voice, "Yi Hui called just now and asked you to try on the wedding dress at 3 o'clock in the afternoon." Their wedding was arranged by Yi Hui, and Yi Hui was also the one who asked about the various matters. Yi Xiannan only relayed the information. However, this also proved that Yi Hui also knew that she was here and living together with him. Su Mu's head drooped. She had an indescribable feeling. Yi Xiangnan could probably guess what she was thinking. "We're getting married soon, so there's no need to go through the formalities. Besides, you already have a child, isn't this kind of thing normal?" Su Mu's face turned red. She bit her lips and didn't say anything. Yi Xiangnan didn't say anything else. He just glanced at her and left. Sumu let out a long sigh and didn't get up immediately. Instead, she leaned against the bed in a daze. His face was a little hot, and his heart was palpitating. She didn't dare to think too much and quickly got up. Cymbidium chinense happened to wake up as well. The little fellow asked while putting on her clothes, "Mommy, can I have breakfast with Daddy now?" Sumu smiled faintly. Of course. Although she did not want to face Yi Xiangnan, especially today, she could not deprive Cymbidium chinense of his happiness. Sumu helped the little fellow brush his teeth and wash his face before taking him downstairs. Yi Xiangnan didn't seem to be in a hurry to leave today. He was sitting at the dining table reading the morning newspaper. He had finished his breakfast. Hearing the footsteps, he looked up at Sumu, as if he was waiting for her. Sumu arranged for Cymbidium chinense to sit down. Cymbidium chinense breakfast was, of course, very sumptuous, which Auntie Wang had carefully prepared. Sumu was really not interested in milk and bread. She went to the kitchen to make a bowl of millet porridge for herself. Because she used a pressure cooker, it was ready in a few minutes. In the dining room, Auntie Wang said unhappily, "Miss Su seems to have a problem with me, sir. She doesn't eat the breakfast I make." What shocked Auntie Wang even more was that Sir and Sumu had slept together last night. Chapter 48-81. 1 second to remember, this. She thought that Mr. Yi didn't like Miss Su very much, and even wanted to sleep in separate beds after getting married. Now they were sharing a room before getting married. Unexpectedly. Auntie Wang felt very uncomfortable, so she took advantage of Sumu when she was free. Yi Xiangnan didn't like Sumu, but he didn't like his future wife to be criticized by a servant, so he said unhappily, "In the future, add a Chinese meal for breakfast." "Auntie Wang, you should ask." "Well, Miss Su's opinion." Auntie Wang almost fainted. He was being biased. How could she bear it? Auntie Wang still wanted to say something, but Auntie Chen, who was sensible, pulled her, hinting her not to say it. As a servant, she should do whatever the master said. What could she say? Unless she didn't want to do it anymore. She had said several times that Miss Su was the master, and it seemed that Mr. Yi didn't hate her so much. If he really hated her, how could they sleep together? The relationship between husband and wife couldn't be too bad even if they didn't sleep separately. Auntie Wang was also an experienced person, so she really couldn't see it clearly. At this time, Sumu came over, and she didn't know that she had caused displeasure. She simply didn't want to eat Western-style breakfast, and it was not good to let other people's servants serve her, so she made breakfast herself. Moreover, Yi Xiangnan didn't like her, so he didn't think it was hard for her. She ate quietly with a spoon without making any sound. Yi Xiangnan looked at her quietly for a while, and then said, "I want Cymbidium chinense to go to kindergarten in a month. He is old enough to go to school. 4 years old, long past the age of enlightenment." He thought of one thing: why didn't you go to school before? Sumu pursed her lower lip and said very lightly, "I don't have the conditions for the time being. I want to wait until he is 6 years old." 6 years old. Yi Xiangnan stared at her and didn't speak again. Sumu felt that he didn't like her again. After a long time, he said again, "Did you plan not to bring Cymbidium chinense back to the Yi family for the rest of your life?" Sumu couldn't answer this question. Yi Xiangnan said coldly, "Sumu, you can't be too selfish. If I get married and have children, what will happen to Cymbidium chinense? Will I be an illegitimate child for the rest of my life?" No matter how good-tempered Sumu was, she couldn't stand it anymore. She argued with him a few times, "Was I willing? Yi Xiangnan, who's the selfish one here? If you had taken precautions back then, I wouldn't have gotten pregnant, and I wouldn't have gotten Cymbidium chinense. I wouldn't have had to deal with the things that happened later, and I wouldn't have been suspected of being a scheming woman." She had probably suppressed it for a long time, so when she said it, her tone was agitated and not very good. The atmosphere was mesmerizing. At this time, the two aunties had forgotten Sumu's identity. They felt that it was very exciting for the male and female hosts to fight, so they wanted to watch the fun. However, they did not forget their own identity. They hugged Cymbidium chinense and avoided them. They were adults. If they wanted to quarrel, they could quarrel as much as they wanted. As expected, as soon as the others left, Yi Xiangnan frowned. "Are you a child? Can't you take the medicine by yourself after the matter?" Sumu said coldly, "I didn't know anything at that time." Yi Xiangnan was very unhappy, but he felt that Sumu was now like a child throwing a tantrum. He didn't know where her temper came from, so he snorted, "You were 19 or 20 years old at that time. You are a child. Will a child go to that kind of place?" Sumu stared at him. Her lips trembled, and she didn't speak for a long time. Chapter 48-82. Yi Xiangnan felt that there was nothing more to say to her. He wiped his lower lip, looked up at Cymbidium chinense on the stairs on the second floor, and said calmly, "It's common for adults to quarrel." Cymbidium chinense said, "Just like children fighting, Dad." Yi Xiangnan frowned, and then smiled slightly, "Probably." Cymbidium chinense said, "Oh," but his eyes still fell on his face. After a while, he asked in a childish voice, "Dad, will you give in to Mom?" Yi Xiangnan didn't expect his son to say that. He thought for a while and said, "It depends." Cymbidium chinense was a little disappointed with this answer. He said to himself, "If it were me, I would give in to girls." Yi Xiangnan was a little amused. He waved at Cymbidium chinense. Cymbidium chinense ran down immediately. After all, he was a child, and he threw himself into Yi Xiangnan's arms. Yi Xiangnan looked at the face that was very similar to his, and his heart softened a little. "When you grow up, you will find that it's not like this." Cymbidium chinense was puzzled. "Dad, what is it like?" "When you grow up, you will know." Yi Xiangnan touched his head again, and refused to answer this question. Cymbidium chinense looked at him strangely, and then didn't say anything. Yi Xiangnan should go to the company. He hugged his son again, and then went to the parking lot to open the door and get in the car. However, he didn't start the car immediately. He thought back to last night until now. From sleeping in the same room to quarreling this morning, and comforting Cymbidium chinense. It was really like the life of an old married couple, without any ups and downs. Yi Xiannan laughed self-deprecatingly and drove away. In the villa, after the male owner left, it became a little more quiet. It was true that the relationship between the remaining people was not that good. Sumu washed her and Cymbidium chinense clothes and hung them up. Auntie Chen saw it and said that she could wash it herself. Auntie Wang pulled her over and whispered, "If she wants to do it herself, we will be happy to do it." "Why are you so silly?" "It's not that we don't want to do it, it's that she wants to do it herself." Auntie Chen glanced at her and seemed to be at a loss for words. Auntie Wang smiled carelessly and went to do her own things. Auntie Chen sighed. There was nothing she could do. Sumu hadn't found a job yet, so she had a lot of time to accompany Cymbidium chinense. At noon, she specially made a dessert for Cymbidium chinense, which made Cymbidium chinense quite happy. At noon, she accompanied Cymbidium chinense for an afternoon nap. Cymbidium chinense slept very soundly, but Sumu couldn't fall asleep. As soon as she closed her eyes, she would think of what happened last night. After being tormented like this for a long time, she got up and went to the bathroom to wash her face with cold water. She looked at herself in the mirror. She was still very afraid of him. She was still very afraid of this kind of thing. She didn't even know if he would still sleep in the master bedroom tonight. If that was the case, what should she do? Just then, Sumu suddenly remembered that he didn't seem to have the blood drain from her face. Looking at the time, it was only 1 o'clock, so she went downstairs and told Auntie Chin, "I'm going out to buy something." Auntie Chin agreed. Sumu drove the car and left. Seeing her leave, Auntie Wang snorted. She goes out all day long. I wonder what stole her soul. You'd better watch your mouth. Auntie Chin couldn't take it anymore. Besides, you said that even Sir couldn't steal her soul. Who else could? Auntie Wang muttered, "That's true. Sir is rich and good-looking." Auntie Chin just smiled and said nothing else. Chapter 4883. Memorize. Auntie Wang muttered, "That's true. Sir is rich and good-looking." Sumu went to the pharmacy to buy some morning sickness medicine and a bottle of contraceptive medicine for a long time. She didn't want Yi Xiangnan to know because he said he wanted a child, but she didn't want one. She didn't want to discuss such a topic with him, so she bought it. She went back and followed the instructions to take the morning after medicine. She put the medicine she usually took on the side of the bed where she slept. At 2:30, she woke up Cymbidium chinense and took him to try on the dress. As she helped Cymbidium chinense put on the dress, she said, "You have to be polite when you see your aunt later, okay?" She reached out and pinched Cymbidium chinense's little nose. "Call me auntie." Cymbidium chinense grunted and nodded vigorously. Sumu looked at his little face and felt comforted. She kissed him and said, "Okay, Mommy will take you there." She took Cymbidium chinense's little hand and went downstairs. She told Auntie Chen and drove away. Auntie Chen said to Auntie Wang, "Look, Miss Su is very polite. Don't always target her in the future. It's not easy for a woman to raise a child. I heard that she's only 24 years old. Think about it. Many girls don't want their children when they accidentally get pregnant. It's very good that she can give birth to a child like Miss Su and raise it so well." Auntie Wang's tone was somewhat sarcastic. "Why are you always speaking up for her? Wouldn't it be better if she had some self-respect? Then she wouldn't have a child." She had just seen the morning after pill in the trash can in the kitchen. "Ha, foxy woman, you've only been here for 2 days and you're already sleeping with Sir. You really don't know shame." Of course, Sumu didn't know how Auntie Wong had framed her behind her back. She drove to the wedding dress store, and Fictional was already there. Sumu brought Cymbidium chinense over. When Cymbidium chinense saw Sumu, it sweetly called out to Sumu, "Auntie." Sumu really liked this little guy. She hugged and kissed it, then poked her head out. "Where's my brother?" She thought that Yi Xiangnan had come with her. After all, she had to try on the gown. Sumu was a little stunned. She didn't know that Yi Hui had called Yi Xiangnan. She thought about it and smiled. "He's busy. It'll be the same if he takes the test another day." Yi Hui snorted. "We'll only know the effect if we try it together." Busy, busy, busy all day long. She was still very easygoing with Sumu and treated Cymbidium chinense very well. Sumu also liked Yi Fenghui very much. It was just that Sumu was a person of few words. Besides, there was a big gap between her and Yi Hui's background. She was afraid that if she was too friendly, it would make people dislike her. So, she still kept a distance. Yi Hui didn't care too much. She quite liked Sumu's character. It was good that she didn't fight for anything. But no matter how good she was, it was useless. Her brother didn't like it very much. She heard that he started to have a lot of affairs outside. It seemed that he didn't want to restrain himself even after marriage. Yi Hui could sympathize with Sumu a little more when she thought about it. The road ahead was not going to be easy. When they arrived at the changing room, Cymbidium chinense smiled. "Sister-in-law, go and change with the stylist. I'll bring Cymbidium chinense to change." Sumu nodded. "Sorry to trouble you." Yi Hui felt that she was being too polite. In fact, this politeness was somewhat targeted at her brother. To put it bluntly, Sumu didn't treat Yi Xiangnan as her husband. The two of them just got married because of convenience. Yi Hui quite appreciated a girl who wasn't bewitched by her brother. But although she appreciated it, she didn't dare to say it out loud. Rich families were like this. Marriage without love was like this. Everyone understood it, but they wouldn't say it out loud. They had to give each other some face. But she didn't know if Sumu understood it. Chapter 48-84. Yi Hui prepared a wedding dress and 3 dresses for Sumu, all designed by famous designers in Milan. Sumu changed into a wedding dress. The beige wedding dress was very soft. The designer praised, "Mrs. Ye's temperament is very good. This wedding dress is very suitable for her. Miss Ye really has a good taste." 2 people were praised in one sentence. Sumu sat in front of the makeup mirror, smiling but did not speak. The makeup artist carefully styled her and then put on the veil. "It's really beautiful." The stylist praised, "Miss Su's figure is very good. She is very thin and has a rare good bone shape." As for the face, although the facial features could only be said to be delicate, when put together, it made people feel very comfortable. After the makeup added a lot of color, the overall look was quite amazing. When Yi Hui saw this, she couldn't help but say, "This is too beautiful." Cymbidium chinense came over and hugged her leg. "Mom, you are so beautiful." Sumu wanted to say something, but she frowned and her whole face was a little distorted. Yi Hui was shocked and reached out to hold her. "Sister-in-law, is the waist too tight? Is it uncomfortable?" The stylist quickly said, "It's not tight. Mrs. Ye's waist is less than 60, so it's not tight at all." Yi Hui was even more nervous. Did she eat something bad? It looks like she has a stomachache. Sumu bit her lip. She probably guessed that it was because of the morning after medicine. She wanted to endure it. After all, she didn't want others to know about it, and she didn't want to alarm Yi Xiangnan. But the more she wanted to endure, the more she couldn't believe it. It was so painful that sweat oozed from her forehead and rolled down one by one. Cymbidium chinense was so scared that she cried. "Mom, what's wrong with you?" Yi Hui was also nervous, but she was an adult after all. She immediately asked Su Mu if she could change clothes. Su Mu nodded. She also didn't want to wear this to the hospital. It was too scary. After changing her clothes, she didn't remove her makeup. She just let her hair down and went straight to the hospital. In the car, Yi Hui made a call to Yi Xiangnan. "Brother, sister-in-law suddenly feels unwell. We're going to the hospital now. You should come over immediately." On the other side, Yi Xiangnan was in the middle of a meeting. He was displeased to receive the call, but he still said in a low voice, "I'll come after the meeting." With that, he hung up the phone. Yi Hui was speechless. She turned to Su Mu and said, "Sister-in-law, my brother will be here soon." Actually, Su Mu didn't really care whether he came or not. She just wanted to go to the hospital. After arriving at the hospital, the doctor confirmed it after asking a few questions. It was a drug allergy. Gastric lavage is required. Su Mu's face was pale. Cymbidium chinense was so scared that she wanted to cry. Even Yi Hui's legs were trembling. Fortunately, Wen Yuan and Yi Mubai rushed over very quickly. Only then did Yi Hui feel relieved. "Mom, Dad." Wen Yuan and Yi Mubai valued their grandson, Cymbidium chinense, very much. They also valued Su Mu. Besides giving birth to Cymbidium chinense was brought up very well. She was smart and polite. Moreover, she looked like a replica of Xiangnan. Yi Mubai carried Cymbidium chinense while Wen Yuan asked about Su Mu's condition with concern. Yi Hui was still a little confused. The doctor said that she needs to have her stomach pumped. "Mom, I heard that it's very painful." Wen Yuan patted her. "I've already asked your father to find the best doctor. Don't worry, Yi Hui." Yi Hui couldn't be completely at ease. She poked her head out and said, "I don't know when brother will come. They were going to get married soon. At this time, they couldn't stay in the hospital without showing their faces." Chapter 4885. Wen Yuan didn't care about his son. The most important thing now was to figure out Su Mu's health. Could she be cured with a gastric lavage? Because she was a woman, she pulled Yi Hui aside and asked her carefully. Yi Hui was a little girl. Hearing her mother's question, she mumbled. Wen Yuan was a little stunned. Her son acted so fast. She didn't expect that they would live together so soon. Besides, didn't Xiangnan not like Su Mu? Why? She was surprised and happy. When a husband and wife were together, it didn't matter if their relationship was weak. It could be nurtured. What she was most afraid of was her son ignoring her. Now they were living together. But Xiangnan couldn't let Su Mu take morning after medicine. Wen Yuan looked at Yi Hui. Yi Hui said slowly, "I don't know. You have to ask my brother." Wen Yuan sighed. "Let's talk about it later. Go and see your sister-in-law now. She's getting married soon. She can't have any problems with her health." They went together. Su Mu had already been pushed into the operating room. The doctor said a few words to Wen Yuan and went in. Wen Yuan and Yi Hui waited outside. About half an hour later, Su Mu was pushed out. She was very weak, but there was no problem. The female doctor said seriously, "It's better for the patient not to take medicine in the future. She is allergic to this kind of medicine." It's better to talk to Mr. Yi and let him take measures. These words made Yi Hui a little embarrassed. Even when Yuan's face turned red. They didn't know where to put it. But in front of Su Mu, they had to pretend to be very calm. Otherwise, Su Mu would probably be embarrassed. Su Mu had to stay in the hospital for a day and could be discharged the next day. After resting for an hour, she woke up. When Yuan accompanied her and comforted her, Yi Xiangnan came after a meeting. He didn't come alone. He brought Lin Lu, the manager of the public relations department. Stars Entertainment recognized that she was very beautiful. Lin Lu followed them into the ward. She just greeted the Yi family and didn't have anything to do with Su Mu. Su Mu didn't care. However, Yi Hui cared about it. Lin Lu was rumored to have an affair with her brother in the company. It was said that Lin Lu would bring Lin Lu along when she went on a business trip. She was like an underground madam. Yi Hui was quite angry. She had come to see Su Mu. Why did he bring such a woman over? Yi Hui also had the temper of a child. As for Lin Lu, she was an employee of Stars Entertainment, so she directly asked her to buy a porridge, saying that Su Mu wanted to eat it tonight. Lin Lu had been in the workplace for several years. She had always been able to stay by CEO Ye's side. Naturally, she would not offend Yi Hui over such a small matter. Besides, the two elders of the Yi family were still watching from the side. Lin Lu nodded politely and said, "Okay. I'll go at once." Her attitude was so good that no one could find fault with it. Yi Hui was quite angry. When Yuan glanced at her and then smiled gently at Lin Lu. "Then I'll have to trouble Manager Lin." Manager Lin's 3 words made the relationship between them very clear, very clear. Manager Lin would always be an employee of Stars Entertainment. Even if he had something to do with Yi Xiangnan, he would still be Manager Lin, and nothing else. There was only one position for Mrs. Yi. This was when Yuan's attitude. After all, as a mother and a grandmother, she still didn't like outside women very much. Lin Lu could have an ambiguous relationship with the man she was going to marry, so she was not a good person. This showed her ambition even more. A woman like Lin Lu would not be willing to be an outsider for a lifetime. This was what Wen Yuan was worried about. Chapter 4886. Su Mu's character was very simple. She could tell at a glance that she was no match for Lin Lu. After Lin Lu left, Yi Xiangnan frowned. "I have a business meeting to attend later. Why did you send Lin Lu away?" "A meeting." When Yuan looked at his son. "Is the meeting more important than your wife?" "Su Mu is already like this. You have to accompany her." Yi Xiangnan endured it. "There are doctors and nurses here. Besides, didn't she have a gastric lavage?" He only knew that she ate something bad, but he didn't know what it was. When he took the medical record and looked at it, his face suddenly darkened. The atmosphere was also quite strange. Especially when Yuan and Yi Hui, who knew about it, coughed softly. "You guys talk." Before when Yuan went out, he gave his son a look. Yi Xiangnan didn't say anything. He turned around and closed the door. He turned his head and his eyes fell on Su Mu. His voice was a little cold. "Don't you want to explain?" Su Mu looked down. "Explain what?" "Explain the consequences of taking the medicine on your own and making everyone happy around you, right?" Yi Xiangnan was a little annoyed. She didn't want a child, so she couldn't wait to take the medicine. Su Mu was still very uncomfortable. She leaned against the bed and didn't want to argue. She felt that it was a little ridiculous. She was not a fool. Just now, Manager Lin had a special relationship with him. Not only did he bring him here, but he also accused her of taking the medicine. Did such a marriage also have to let her give birth to a child? She didn't say anything, and Yi Xiangnan was even more unhappy. He sat on the sofa and looked at her. Don't take the medicine so casually in the future. Sumu bit her lower lip and looked up at him. Do you want to have a vasectomy or me? Yi Xiangnan thought that he had heard wrong and looked at her with a frown. Sumu thought and said, I'll have a vasectomy. Yi Xiangnan wanted to strangle this woman. She thought of a vasectomy after a drug allergy. He said coldly, I don't need it. As for why he didn't need it, he didn't say it clearly. Sumu didn't know if he meant that they wouldn't be living together in the future or if he would take care of it, but she didn't ask. She didn't have the strength to deal with him now, and she felt even more embarrassed. She lay still and closed her eyes. At this time, Lin Lu came back. She put a bowl of porridge on the dining table and said with a smile, CEO Yi, it's time for the business meeting, you. She was very appropriate, but she subtly ignored Sumu. Yi Xiangnan didn't care. He looked at Sumu and said, I'm going to a meeting. I'll ask the driver to pick you up from the hospital tomorrow morning. Lin Lu, who was at the side, was still smiling. When Sumu opened her eyes, she happened to see Lin Lu smile. Women understand women. Sumu was not stupid. She felt Lin Lu's hostility. She bit her lip and didn't say anything. She just lowered her head and hummed. Yi Xiangnan frowned. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he left. At the door, Cymbidium chinense called Daddy. Yi Xiangnan hugged him and thought for a while. Stay with Mom in the hospital today. Cymbidium chinense nodded obediently. Yi Xiangnan kissed him again and then handed Cymbidium chinense back to Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan looked at him with a complicated expression, but Yi Xiangnan didn't care. He and Sumu didn't have any feelings for each other, and it wasn't a particularly serious matter. He felt that there was no need to stay by the hospital bed. Besides, she would be discharged tomorrow. In the end, Yi Xiannan still left with Lin Lu to attend the meeting. Chapter 4887. After Yi Xiangnan finished his meeting, he returned to the villa and found that the house was empty. Only then did he remember that Sumu was in the hospital. It was already 12:00 at night. He naturally wouldn't call a patient's cell phone, so he called Yi Hui. Yi Hui answered the phone and said in a sheep's voice, Brother. Yi Xiangnan's voice was indifferent, Are you in the hospital? Yi Hui's voice was a little confused, No, I've already gone home. By the way, brother, Cymbidium chinense is with me. Sister-in-law said that Cymbidium chinense bronchus is not very good, and it's easy to get allergic in the hospital, so I brought it home. Mom will take care of it at night. Yi Xiangnan rubbed his eyebrows. You mean that Sumu is alone, right? Yi Hui nodded. Sister-in-law said that she's fine and insisted that we come back. Got it. Go to sleep. Yi Xiangnan wanted to light a cigarette. He was a little annoyed, but he didn't know why. Later, he thought that Sumu didn't have any major problems. She just had her stomach pumped, so staying in the hospital for one night was nothing. Thinking of this, he calmed down. He reached out to open the drawer to take a lighter, but he saw a medicine bottle. He hadn't seen it before, so he knew what it was. He took it with his long hand, looked at it for a while, and accurately threw it into the trash can. He didn't have the mood to smoke, so he went downstairs to eat some supper. He drank tonight, and it was Lin Lu who drove him back. He knew what Lin Lu was thinking, but he wasn't in the mood, and he wouldn't bring a woman home. When he went downstairs, Auntie Chin was still awake. The old woman was secretly watching TV. Seeing Yi Xiangnan coming downstairs, she was shocked and patted her chest. "Sir, why aren't you sleeping so late?" Yi Xiangnan walked over slowly and sat down. "I can't sleep." "Go make a bowl of noodles for me, Auntie Chin." Auntie Chin felt strange. "Sir, you didn't like noodles before." She suddenly remembered that Miss Su made a bowl of noodles last time, and it was quite fragrant, but she didn't dare to do that. She felt strange. Why isn't Miss Su back yet? She's in the hospital. Yi Xiangnan exhaled. She'll be back tomorrow morning. I'll ask the driver to pick her up tomorrow. Auntie Chin reacted instinctively. Miss Su will be alone in the hospital. She'll be alone in the hospital. She'll be alone in the hospital. Yi Xiannan looked at Auntie Chin and felt that she was talking too much. Auntie Chin didn't dare to say anything and immediately went to the kitchen. In less than 10 minutes, a bowl of fragrant noodles was served, along with a glass of milk. Yi Xiannan took a few bites, but couldn't help but feel that it wasn't as fragrant as the noodles Su Mu had made that day. However, faced with the old man's earnest gaze, he couldn't say anything, so he quietly finished his meal. "Sir, change, sir, you see, S, and T yi. No, T. No, absolutely not." Auntie Chin waved her hand. "I'm just talking about face. I don't mean anything else. I'm definitely not talking about how you treat Miss Su." "Sir, I'm sleeping." Yi Xiangnan snorted coldly. "Since you're so good at talking, why don't you say more? How would Auntie Chin dare to stay?" She waved her hand and returned to her room. Yi Xiangnan thought about it carefully and felt that it was the opposite. Su Mu had only been here for 2 days, but his sister, his mother, and Auntie Chin had already spoken up for her. What good points did she have? If he couldn't find any good points, was that considered a good point? Chapter 4888. In the end, the bowl of noodles was not finished. Yi Xiangnan went back to the bedroom. He wanted to sleep but couldn't. He felt that something was missing beside his pillow. It's only been 1 night, yet. He sat up and smoked a cigarette. His eyes fell on the medicine bottle all the time. It was a little fierce. At about 2:00 in the morning, he still couldn't fall asleep. He got up and drove to the hospital in his clothes. He wanted to see what the woman had done to him. The car was parked in the parking lot of the hospital. Yi Xiangnan smoked 2 more cigarettes and then went up. The ward was quiet. There was no sound. Yi Xiangnan reached out to open the door of the ward and walked in. It was still quiet. Su Mu fell asleep. In addition to the faint smell of disinfectant, there was a faint feminine fragrance in the air. Yi Xiangnan closed the door and didn't go over. He just stood quietly at the door for a while. Su Mu didn't wake up. She was too weak. Of course, she didn't know that Yi Xiangnan came. About 10 minutes later, Yi Xiangnan left. When he walked out, he happened to meet a nurse. He glanced at the nurse coldly. "Don't tell Miss Su that I have been here." The nurse was stunned. She knew the relationship between Su Mu and Mr. Yi. Weren't they going to get married? Why did he call her Miss Su? It was too distant. Besides, Miss Su was not feeling well at night. It was pitiful for her to be alone. The nurse thought that it was better for them to get married in a well-matched family. She watched Yi Xiangnan leave. Then she withdrew her gaze and snorted, "He is so cruel." She opened the door of the ward and carefully measured Su Mu's temperature without waking her up. Fortunately, it was not high. At about 9:00 in the evening, the temperature suddenly reached 39 degrees. She should have informed the family, but Mrs. Yi. No, Miss Su refused to let her. She thought that Mr. Yi would not leave. She didn't expect that he would leave after a short visit. These rich men were really bad. The nurse silently measured his body temperature and quietly left the room. Sumu woke up early the next morning. The Cymbidium chinense came over early in the morning. The little girl didn't sleep well at night and was always worried about her mother. Yi Hui had brought him here early in the morning. Sumu reached out and stroked the little fellow's head. She smiled and said, "Why don't you sleep a little longer?" Cymbidium chinense did not say a word. Embarrassed, it buried its head into its mother's arms. Sumu hugged him. Knowing that he was frightened, she coaxed him in a gentle voice, "Mom is fine. She just ate something bad." After coaxing it for a long time, the Cymbidium chinense was finally relieved. The driver came up to help carry the things. Actually, there wasn't much to carry, just some food. Sumu was still a little weak. Yi Hui took the little fellow to the villa. In the car, Yi Hui called Yi Xiangnan. "Brother, are you still at home? Sister-in-law and I are back. So is Cymbidium chinense." No one knew what Yi Xiangnan said on the other side of the phone. Cymbidium chinense was stunned. After a long time, she murmured, "Brother, why are you on a business trip? Sister-in-law is just getting better. Shouldn't he accompany her and take care of her?" Yi Hui still wanted to say something, but Sumu gently pulled her sleeve and made an expression. Yi Hui hung up the phone and disagreed. "Sister-in-law, I know you have a good character. But if you don't fight for anything, some people will only go too far." Her brother took Lin Lu on a business trip for about 3 days. A man and a woman were alone together. Who knew what was going to happen? Chapter 48-89. Yi Hui was quite angry. "No, I must stop him." Sumu smiled faintly. "Yi Hui, thank you, but I really don't want it." She looked out of the window and then said softly, "Your brother and I are just like this. We haven't reached that stage yet." Yi Hui was stunned. After a long time, she said, "But sister-in-law, do you really not want to be happy with my brother? Don't you want to grow old together?" She was not only doing it for Sumu, but also for her brother. As a younger sister, she naturally wanted her brother to be happy, but her sister-in-law didn't seem to be prepared for this. In this marriage, her attitude was to go with the flow and let nature take its course. Or it could be said that it was a suicidal marriage. Her brother didn't care, but Sumu was more passive. For a moment, Yi Hui felt that she was the one who was most serious about this marriage. Yi Hui had never been in a relationship before. She was a little shocked and didn't say anything for a long time. It wasn't until they reached the villa that she cheered up. No matter what, they had already given birth to a child. The Yi family wouldn't divorce. She was afraid that the child would be wronged. She wanted to spend more time with Sumu, but she had something to do and had to go back first. She had to talk to Wen Yuan about this matter. Wen Yuan was silent after hearing it. Yi Hui was a little anxious. "Mom, you really don't care about Brother Guan. He won't be happy in the future if he messes around like this." Wen Yuan looked at her and said softly after a long time, "Actually, it's a disaster for Sumu to care too much now. That will make her unhappy. Your brother. If a man goes out to spend money, he can't control himself. Instead of suffering, it's better to not care. That way, he can live longer." Yi Hui was stunned. She didn't understand. When Yuan said directly, "They don't love each other." "Yi Hui, don't think that your brother will like Sumu just because he is rich and handsome. Sumu only likes him because she has a son, or maybe there are other reasons. I don't think this girl is the kind of person who is greedy and vain. If she wholeheartedly throws herself at your brother with such an attitude, she will be really stupid. After a pause, he said, Yi Hui, let Sumu handle it herself. After all, it's a matter between husband and wife. If you interfere too much, Sumu will be in a difficult position and even embarrassed. After all, when Yuan was a man of experience, he was much more rational. She understood that Xiangnan still couldn't let go of Yi Huan in his heart, and he also rejected Su Shu. However, since that was the case, it was better to be cold for a while. Yi Hui still couldn't quite understand Wen Yuan's words. Yi Xiangnan was Su Mu's husband. How could she tolerate her husband being a playboy? Actually, Yi Hui did not know that she could only endure it because she did not love him. If he really fell in love, he couldn't do it for even a moment. On the other side, Su Mu was in the villa. She was just about to go upstairs when Auntie Wang said sarcastically, "You can come and go as you please in this house." Su Mu stopped in her tracks. She was already feeling extremely uncomfortable on the stairs. At this moment, she slowly turned her head and asked softly, "Auntie Wang, what did you say?" There was still a hint of jealousy in Auntie Wang's voice. "I'm saying that some people don't treat this place as their own home. They come and go as they please. I don't know what they do when they're not at home at night." Auntie Chen, who was at the side, had a bad look on her face. She tugged at her and said, "All right, stop talking." However, Auntie Wang felt that her husband could do whatever he wanted when he was not at home. In this house, she and Elder Chin were more like the hostesses than this Miss Su. Therefore, she did not know how to restrain herself at all and said a lot more unpleasant things. Chapter 4890. Sumu naturally couldn't bear it, and she didn't want Cymbidium Chinense to hear this. Cymbidium Chinense wouldn't feel good if her mother was insulted. Sumu had just lived here for a few days, so she couldn't fire Auntie Wang. She heard from Auntie Chin that Auntie Wang was a senior in the old house of the Yi family, so she was particularly arrogant. Sumu wasn't a particularly tolerant person. She felt that she had endured as much as she could. She packed up some clothes, regardless of her weak body, and prepared to go out and live in a hotel for a few days. Maybe she would rent another house when she had time. Cymbidium Chinense was a little scared. He held her with his little hand and said very softly, "Mom, where are we going?" "Let's go out and live for a few days, okay?" Sumu knew that the child was a little flustered, but she really couldn't stay. Cymbidium Chinense stared at her for a while, and then nodded gently to show that he would obey. Sumu reached out and touched his little head, smiling, "Good boy." Pulling a small suitcase, she got in the car with Cymbidium Chinense. One of the advantages of being Mrs. Yi was that she had a card, so she didn't have to suffer with Cymbidium Chinense. Soon, Sumu drove the car to the door of a 4-star hotel, and got off with Cymbidium Chinense to make the room ready. She booked it for a week, and she wanted to find a house to rent this week. In the villa, Auntie Wang was a little confused. She didn't expect that Sumu would be so angry and leave like this. At the same time, she was also a little flustered, afraid that Sumu would complain to the elders of the Yi family. Auntie Chen said, "I told you, don't be so mean. How are you going to explain it to Master if he leaves? Also, the old master likes his great-grandson very much. He's the only child in the Yi family now. If there's a change in the marriage, you won't be able to bear the responsibility." Auntie Wang was still stubborn. "I didn't ask her to leave. She left on her own." Auntie Chin shook her head. "You still don't understand. No matter what, Miss Su is the hostess. Those words were too much. Although Auntie Wang was flustered, she was not that afraid. She still had the support of the old master. Mr. Qin was very obedient to the old master. In this family, the old master had the final say. She comforted herself. After a long time, Auntie Wang suddenly said, "No, I have to call my grandpa." "No, I'd better go in person." Auntie Chen felt something was wrong and immediately said vigilantly, "What do you want to do?" "Don't. Miss Sue will come back once she calms down. You just need to watch your mouth in the future. Don't make a big deal out of it now." Auntie Wang didn't listen to her and kept saying, "If I don't tell her, she will complain about me in front of Madam first. At that time, Madam will punish me first, and old master won't know." She still went. After she went, on the one hand, Yi Xinggang first reprimanded her, but after all, she was an old man, so he still gave her a way out. At the same time, he knew that Su Mu had run away. Yi Xinggang directly called Yi Xiangnan. "Your wife ran away, and I don't know where she is. You deal with it. As for Auntie Wang, she will stay with me for a few days and then go back. Xiangnan, no matter what, Auntie Wang is an old woman in the family. Don't make it too difficult for her. As for Su Mu, let her bear with it." Yi Xiangnan was in Xi City, and he was in the middle of an important meeting. He had to answer the old master's call. The moment he answered, it was such a bad thing. Chapter 4891. 1 second to remember, he frowned, put down the phone in his hand, and then bowed slightly to the people in the conference room. "Go out and make a call." Lin Lu looked at him. And Yi Xiangnan walked out directly. After going out, he called Su Mu's number. Although they were not familiar with each other, they still had a phone. When the phone rang, Su Mu looked at it. She didn't want to pick it up, but in the end, she still picked it up. "What's the matter?" she asked coldly. Yi Xiangnan was silent for about 10 seconds, and then said coldly, "Where are you?" Without waiting for her to answer, he continued, "Go back to the villa immediately, call old master, and tell him that you're back." His tone and words were almost rough, completely commanding. He didn't ask about the cause and effect, just an order, and she carried it out. Su Mu was stunned for a moment, and then she said very softly, "Why?" "Because Auntie Wang is someone by old master's side, I have to give him face. And Su Mu, you're not a child anymore. Yesterday, you took medicine and were hospitalized, and today, you ran away from home with Cymbidium chinense. Is this how you take care of a child? Can you be more rational?" Yi Xiangnan pulled his tie, and his tone was really not very good. Su Mu chuckled lightly. "Home? Whose home is that?" "Mine." Su Mu smiled extremely lightly. "Yi Xiangnan, it's not good for me to be hospitalized, but I don't want Cymbidium chinense to see my mother being insulted every day. I think Cymbidium chinense can understand me." In the end, she said in a somewhat tough tone, "I'm staying in a hotel, and I'll rent a house in a few days." Yi Xiangnan laughed coldly. His laughter was filled with disdain. "Su Mu, don't forget that if you don't work now, how are you going to support Cymbidium chinense? Besides, we're going to get married soon. Do you want my son to live outside?" Su Mu slightly closes her eyes. "I still have some savings, Mr. Yi. We don't have to get married. Cymbidium chinense doesn't have to live a luxurious life. If that's the case, we'd rather live like before." It was a little hard, but he didn't need to be looked down upon. Also, was she sure she could tolerate a man who treated her like this without asking about her feelings? "I'm afraid I can't." After Su Mu finished speaking, she directly hung up the phone. She was afraid that he would call again, so she turned off her phone. Yi Xiangnan listened to the voice on the other end and looked at his phone. He realized that she had hung up the phone. He gritted his teeth. No one had ever dared to hang up on him. When he called again, the phone was switched off. Yi Xiangnan was so angry that he almost wanted to smash the phone. He let out a long sigh, then looked at the time and went to the meeting again. When the meeting was over, it was already noon. He called Yi Hui and asked her to deal with this matter. Yi Hui quickly found out and called back, elder sister-in-law has gone to stay in a hotel with Cymbidium chinense. The environment is not bad. Brother, don't worry. I'll persuade her later. She changed the topic, but Auntie Wang is too much. I heard from Auntie Chin that Auntie Wang has a lot of opinions about elder sister-in-law. She seems to look down on her. Brother, do you want to ask Old Master to let Auntie Wang stay with him? Anyway, Old Master like her very much. It's not a big deal. Do you think I don't want to? Yi Xiangnan let out a breath. Old Master still let her stay with me. Yi Hui whispered a few words. You really listen to him. He's old and muddled. What did you say? Yi Xiangnan asked. Yi Hui immediately shook her head. I don't know. I don't know anything. Chapter 4892. After hanging up the phone, Yi Xiangnan felt a little upset. Both his family and business were not going well. Lin Lu put a cup of coffee on his desk and smiled gently. CEO Yi, have a cup of coffee to refresh yourself. Yi Xiangnan rubbed his eyebrows. What time is the meeting in the afternoon? 3 to 6. Lin Lu smiled. Let's go for a drink after the meeting. CEO Yi doesn't seem to be in a good mood. Yi Xiangnan looked at her and said nothing, but he didn't refuse to have a drink. He and Su Mu got married, and he didn't plan to be faithful. He wouldn't divorce, but he didn't plan to keep his chastity for his wife. At night, he came as promised. At 11 o'clock, Yi Xiangnan went to take a bath and put the phone on the bedside. The phone rang. It was Su Mu. Cymbidium chinense wanted to talk to her father. Su Mu had no choice but to let him call. Lin Lu looked at the phone, looked at the direction of the bathroom, and then picked it up. Hello. CEO Yi is taking a bath. Cymbidium chinense was a little confused. She held the phone and turned to look at Su Mu, and Auntie said that CEO Yi was taking a bath. Is CEO Yi my father? Why is there another auntie when he is taking a bath? Su Mu's heart ached, not for herself, but because Cymbidium chinense had to face this at such a young age. She took the phone from Cymbidium chinense's hand and said 3 words to the other side, sorry to bother you. Then, he hung up the phone and gently caressed Yi Sun's little head. That's Daddy's personal secretary. What do you mean by a personal secretary? Of course, he's always by Daddy's side. Even when taking a bath. TV says that boys and girls should bathe separately. Cymbidium chinense insisted and wanted an answer from her mother. Su Mu had no choice but to cough lightly. Well, I don't think Dad and this auntie always take a bath. I'll ask Dad. Cymbidium chinense reached for her phone again. Su Mu said with a stern face, all right, you can sleep now. Although Cymbidium chinense was curious and wanted to understand, she was still a little afraid of her mother's stern face sometimes. Cymbidium chinense lay down obediently and covered itself with the blanket. Su Mu finally calmed down. She patted him and coaxed him to sleep. Although Cymbidium chinense didn't dare to ask, and although he was very young, what happened tonight had left a lot of shadow in his heart. He vaguely knew that his father didn't like his mother and didn't love his mother. That was why his father left his mother alone in the hospital and why his father brought an aunt out to be with another aunt. Cymbidium chinense fell asleep. There was actually a tear at the corner of his eye. Sumu was a little shocked. She reached out and gently wiped it away for him. She was a little confused. She didn't know if she was right or wrong. Her marriage with Yi Xiangnan was good or bad for Cymbidium chinense. It seemed that she was wrong. Maybe she shouldn't have compromised. Fortunately, they didn't get married. Yi Xiangnan came out of the bathroom and saw Lin Lu holding his phone. He dried his hair and asked faintly, "Who's calling?" It wasn't that he didn't hear the phone ring, but he didn't expect Lin Lu to pick it up. He didn't think that he gave this woman the right. Lin Lu looked up and was a little confused. Then, she said honestly, "It's Miss Su. It seems that Cymbidium chinense wants to talk to you. I accidentally picked it up." Yi Xiangnan frowned. He walked over and flipped through the call history. "Don't touch my phone in the future." Lin Lu nodded. "I was careless. I'm sorry, CEO Yi." She was very humble, so Yi Xiangnan didn't blame her anymore. Chapter 4893. 1 second to remember. He walked to the balcony in a bathrobe and dialed Su Mu's number. As expected, the phone was turned off again. Yi Xiangnan looked at his phone and felt that he was wrong. This woman had a bad temper. He put down the phone, lit a cigarette, and stood on the balcony to smoke. Lin Lu came over and leaned against the railing like him, looking at him. Yi Xiangnan said very indifferently, "Go back to your room." He was not a man who liked to be controlled by women, and Yi Huan did not intend to be serious. He would give her what she wanted, money and status. She would take as much as she had the ability. He would not give her anything else, such as a title. Moreover, when a man was worried about family matters, it was best for a woman not to come and bother him. Lin Lu was very considerate. She apologized again and left. Yi Xiangnan stood in the night wind and slowly smoked. He smoked half a pack before returning to his room. He took the phone and dialed the woman's number again. Of course, the phone was turned off. Yi Xiangnan threw away the phone. When he lay down, he thought to himself that this woman was very troublesome. If it wasn't for Cymbidium chinense, he wouldn't have what? He didn't know either. He probably wouldn't have married her. He wouldn't have. He would have called her. Wasn't it good to learn to be a sensible wife? Wasn't it good to live in luxury? Couldn't she be smarter? Wasn't it good to be a sensible woman like Lin Lu? Yi Xiangnan didn't like women who had too much personality. He especially didn't like women who threw tantrums at him. So when she didn't answer the phone and turned off her phone, he let her be. It wasn't until he returned to the villa after a business trip 3 days later that he remembered such a person. At this time, there were only 5 days left before the wedding. Yi Hui called every day and said that the dress hadn't been tried on yet. Yi Xiangnan usually dismissed her with a few words. Everyone in the Yi family knew about Su Mu's departure. Both Wen Yuan and Yi Mubai had looked for him. Later on, the old master had also looked for him. He gave in and said that he wouldn't allow Auntie Wang to stay at the old mansion. Later on, Auntie Wang had a few words with him. She sounded like she had been wronged. Yi Xiangnan casually said a few words, and then the phone was in the hands of the old master. The old master only said, "You settle your own woman yourself. You can't let him beg her with his old face, right?" Yi Xiangnan hung up and dialed Su Mu's number. He thought that her phone would be turned off again, but the call went through. He said in a cold and mocking voice, "You're willing to pick up the phone now?" Su Mu's voice was very calm. Yi Xiangnan, I have something to talk to you about. You can't say it on the phone, or do you have no legs to go home? He still had a superior attitude. He thought that she had thought it through and wanted to come back. After all, everyone liked a life of luxury. Besides, she had to come back for the sake of Cymbidium chinense. She was not that stupid. As soon as Yi Xiangnan finished speaking, Sumu said softly, Mr. Yi, let's break off the engagement. I will return the things you gave me before, and I will also return the cards in full. As for the things you bought for Cymbidium chinense, just take them as gifts. Su Youbiao felt that she wasn't being greedy. She quietly told him that she didn't want to marry him. Even though Yi Xiangnan had thought of many possibilities, he didn't expect that it would be like this in the end. She really didn't want anything and didn't want to marry him. He didn't believe it and squinted. Miss Su, what tricks are you playing? Chapter 4894. Su Mu's voice is very calm. If Mr. Yi says it's a trick, then it's a trick. Let's meet and talk. You'd better ask your lawyer to prepare the documents, and I'll sign them again. It is said that those signed before are all effective. Yi Xiangnan frowns. Su Mu. I'm here. She is soft and weak, but she doesn't give in at all. Find a time. Why? Yi Xiangnan squints and asks her. On the other side of the phone, Su Mu smiles, because Cymbidium chinense is not happy. For a few days, Cymbidium chinense hardly smiles. Su Mu is his mother, so how can she not know his mind? Such a father is not a very glorious thing for Cymbidium chinense. She and Cymbidium chinense say not to get married, and Cymbidium chinense is relieved. Then Cymbidium chinense asks her quietly, Mom, will you marry a prince who loves you in the future? Sure enough, this is what Cymbidium chinense thinks. Su Mu said to him at that time, I don't know whether he will be a prince or not, but he will definitely love me and Cymbidium chinense. Cymbidium chinense smiles and hooks his little finger with her. Su Mu feels a little sad when she makes this decision. Cymbidium chinense puts her before him, and he is only 4 years old. After making an appointment with Yi Xiangnan, Su Mu hangs up the phone. In fact, she goes back to the villa again on the way and moves out her things and Cymbidium chinense things. She moves away from there officially and draws a clear line with Yi Xiangnan. Yi Xiangnan hung up and looked at Auntie Chin. What's the matter? Auntie Chin whispered, Sir, Miss Su came back once and took everything away. Is she not coming back anymore? Yi Xiangnan looked at her, then slowly sat on the sofa and said softly, with Cymbidium chinense here, where can she go? Tell me. Auntie Chin actually dared to say boldly, it's better for children to follow their mothers. As soon as she finished speaking, she realized that she had said something wrong, so she hurriedly added, if Miss Su doesn't want to come back, Sir can pursue her. A rich and handsome man like Sir, all girls will like him. Rich and good-looking. Was that all he had? Auntie Chin looked at him. Yi Xiangnan was a little vexed. He was almost done with his work and now Su Mu was causing this mess. He had yet to explain it to his family. If he knew, old Master Shin would probably be the first to jump out. Yi Xiannan slowly went upstairs and walked to the master bedroom. There were originally some of Su Mu's personal belongings inside, but he knew they were gone with just a glance. She had taken them all. She had only stayed here for 2 days, so there was not even a trace of her breath left. He then went to the changing room and opened the closet. Indeed, everything was taken away. She must have been serious when she said that she wasn't going to get married. Returning to the side of the bed, he laid down and smoked a cigarette. When he went to the bedside table to get a lighter, he found a car key. It was the BMW that he had asked her to drive. She had even let go of that. Before this, Yi Xiangnan did not believe that anyone would not care about money or love money. Even he could not do that. But now, Sumu had really given up on everything and only asked not to marry him. Did she really care about Lin Lu's existence that much? Yi Xiangnan let out a long sigh. If he were to tell Sumu that he would keep his chastity, he would never say it out loud. At most, those women would not show themselves in front of her, let alone challenge her status as the legal wife. He would be annoyed by those women, let alone the legal wife. Men wanted to be relaxed, not a woman who was looking for trouble. Chapter 48-95. Yi Xiangnan met Sumu the next day. And he took the time to go, which was not in line with his habit, but he still went. They met in Sumu's small apartment. He also wanted to see Cymbidium chinense. Sumu opened the door for him and quietly stood aside. Cymbidium chinense was playing with toys on the sofa. When it saw Yi Xiangnan, it just called him Dad softly. It was very polite, well, very distant. Yi Xiangnan didn't know what happened that night. Sumu didn't care about it, but obviously, Cymbidium chinense cared about it. Yi Xiangnan certainly wouldn't explain these to a child, and he didn't know how to explain it. He just stretched out his hand and patted his little head. Go to the room to play, I have something to talk to Mom. Cymbidium chinense glanced at him indifferently. There was no light in its eyes like before. Yi Xiangnan was a little helpless. He watched the little child enter the room, but the door was not closed. He looked at Sumu. Sumu poured him a glass of water and sat opposite him. This apartment was better than the previous one. At least there was a place to stay. Yi Xiangnan's voice was slightly low. You really don't want to get married. You should know Cymbidium chinense. Cymbidium chinense is like this now. If you force him to go back, I think he may be autistic and not happy. Sumu was calm. Mr. Yi, do you want to do this? Yi Xiangnan looked at her quietly. After a while, he wiped his face. Do you care so much about Lin Lu's existence? Sumu said straightforwardly, I don't care, but I don't get respect. Cymbidium chinense is the same. Before, Cymbidium chinense longed for a home and a father. On the night they went to the villa, Cymbidium chinense was so happy, but it was disappointed after a few days. Sumu's mentality was good. She respected Cymbidium chinense's choice. Yi Xiangnan didn't look so good. He felt that this woman was a little troublesome. Of course, he wouldn't let Cymbidium chinense wander outside. Of course, he wouldn't beg Sumu. He was proud since he was a child. Of course, he wouldn't give in because of Sumu. At this point, there was nothing more to talk about. He looked at her. What do you plan to do in the future? Keep looking for a part-time job to support Yi-sun. Sumu said calmly, I used to live well too. Yi Xiangnan smiled and looked around. Is this what you mean by living well? Sumu didn't want to tell him. She didn't want him to look down on her. She knew that she was insignificant in his heart. That was why Lin Lu had happened. Not only did he bring Lin Lu to the hospital, but he also took her out on a business trip to sleep with her. Although she didn't care whether she loved him or not, she still needed basic respect. Moreover, Cymbidium chinense had lost basic trust in him. Sumu walked to the window. Outside the small window was a tree with green leaves. She stared at the green leaves and said softly, Mr. Yi, maybe we were born differently, but we are equal except for wealth and status. Yi Xiangnan said mockingly, then tell me, is there anything else in life that is more important than these two? Su-mu looked at him calmly. Maybe you really can't understand the feelings of ordinary people. Mr. Yi, I won't embarrass you. Please don't embarrass Cymbidium chinense. This child just wants to grow up with me. It's his own choice to be an ordinary person in the future. He can't blame others. Yi Xiangnan probably knew that she was determined. He smiled coldly. Miss Su, you can't be too selfish. Chapter 4896. Yi Xiangnan probably knew that she had made up her mind. He smiled coldly. Miss Su, you can't be too selfish. Su-mu was still indifferent. Maybe. I also need Cymbidium chinense, so please give up Cymbidium chinense and let him stay with me. Yi Xiangnan lowered his eyes. As long as you don't regret this, easy wealth. He stood up and gave her some leeway. Come to me when you think it through. If you can't find me, you can call my secretary. After that, he went to the master bedroom and looked at Cymbidium chinense again. He didn't leave any property to Su-mu. He didn't give it to her because he still hoped that Cymbidium chinense would return to the Yi family. He just wanted to know how long Su-mu could maintain his arrogance after experiencing a few days of riches and honor. He left. Su-mu sat on the sofa and was a little lost in thought. Yi Xiangnan said so much, but he didn't mention loyalty. In his heart, Su-mu didn't need loyalty to this marriage at all. She knew it at first, but she still felt uncomfortable after it happened. She was not respected in this way. Moreover, it was blatantly expressed to her. Su-mu sat quietly. Cymbidium chinense ran out and stood beside his mother, hugging her with his arms. He buried his little head gently and didn't speak for a long time. What's wrong, Cymbidium chinense? Su-mu's voice was very soft. Do you want to live with Daddy? The little guy shook his head and said with some distress, I want to be with Mommy. Such a small fellow already knew that his mother was being bullied. He hugged Su-mu. His body was soft and warm. Su-mu let out a long sigh. Cymbidium chinense, you can't regret your decision. You'll have to suffer if you follow Mommy, but Mommy will do my best to give you the best. The little Cymbidium chinense also clenched his little fist. Mommy, Cymbidium chinense will also work hard. When I grow up, I will buy a villa for Mommy and give Mommy the best life, just like, at Daddy's place. Su-mu smiled. She reached out and caressed his little head, then hugged him. After a while, she said in a low voice, Cymbidium chinense, go to kindergarten. Mommy can go to work, okay? Cymbidium chinense's eyes widened at first, then it became excited. He had always wanted to go to school, but he was afraid that his mother did not have the money. Now, his mother said that he could go to school. Looking at the excitement in his eyes, Su-mu felt a little bitter. Although Yi Xiangnan was high and mighty, some of what he said was true. Cymbidium chinense did not get the best education with her. Even the place he lived in was simple and crude. Su-mu felt a little sad, but she could not show it. She could only reach out and pat his little head. After Yi Xiangnan went back, he was naturally called over by Yi Zhengang and scolded. But there was nothing he could do. In the end, Auntie Wang went back to the villa. She was happy at first, but when she reached the villa, she saw Wen Yuan there. Auntie Wang's heart skipped a beat. Wen Yuan was the most difficult person to deal with in the family. Everyone else turned a blind eye to her, but Wen Yuan was not easy to talk to. Maybe it was because she was the only female in the family. Auntie Wang went over and called her madam. Wen Yuan was sitting on the sofa, holding a cup of tea in his hand. He heard Auntie Wang's voice, but did not raise his head. He just asked calmly, "Where's Xiangnan? Why didn't he come back with you?" Chapter 4897. Updated fast. When Yuan was sitting on the sofa, holding a cup of tea in his hand and drinking it. Hearing Auntie Wang's voice, he did not raise his head, but just asked lightly, "Where is Xiangnan? Why didn't he come back with you?" Young master went to the company. It seems that there is an important meeting, so I came back by myself. Auntie Wang did not dare to neglect and answered clearly word by word. Her attitude was totally different from that of Su Mu. Not only when Yuan's status in the Yi family, but also when Yuan's family was extremely prominent. Because of this, Auntie Wang was as obedient as a cat in front of him. When Yuan smiled coldly, "Auntie Wang, since you are back and want to work for Xiangnan, I have to say something in advance. Otherwise, something will happen and ruin Xiangnan's marriage. Old master spoils you, but I am not in the mood. As a mother, I hope that Xiangnan can be happy. At least, he can have a complete family." Cold sweat came out of Auntie Wang's forehead, and she kept saying yes. When Yuan wanted her to be like this. If he did not teach her a lesson, she would not know who was the master. No matter what, Su Mu was the mother of Cymbidium chinense and the master here. In the future, everything in the Yi family would belong to Cymbidium chinense. Auntie Wang was so arrogant just because she had washed old master's feet twice. She really did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. In fact, everyone in the Yi family knew that Auntie Wang just had an ambiguous relationship with old master because she was a little beautiful when she was young. Old master was old. After losing Su Fu, he did not respect himself and had an ambiguous relationship with the servants in the family. Auntie Wang was also shrewd. She refused to stay in the old house, but came to her son to abuse her power. When Yuan had never liked Auntie Wang. He reluctantly agreed because of old master's face, but he did not expect that she really regarded herself as the mistress. After saying these words, Auntie Wang probably understood that Mrs. Su hated her and blamed her for Miss Su running away from home. Although she was afraid of Mrs. Su, she still had to make it clear. "Mrs. Su, it's true that I quarreled with Miss Su, but Miss Su refused to get married because of Miss Lin Lulin. It has nothing to do with me. I really love young master and young master Su, and I have no selfishness," Auntie Wang said. When Yuan was furious, he slapped the armrest of the sofa and said, "Auntie Wang, don't take advantage of your seniority in front of me. Your words are too outrageous. Do you have any ideas about our Xiannan? Stop saying such outrageous words. You're making a fool out of yourself. We're just pretending that nothing happened between you and the old man. That's giving face to the old man. Don't think of yourself as our elder, and you're trying to teach us a lesson." The more when Yuan thought about it, the more he felt it was inappropriate. This old thing could not be allowed to stay. How could there be such an outrageous thing around Xiangnan? So he directly called old master, meaning that Auntie Wang could not stay here. Auntie Wang was about to cry, and tears rolled down her cheeks. "Madam." She seemed to be at a loss and said, "I have been in the Yi family for so many years, and I have never been treated like this." When Yuan sneered. At this time, there was no need to care about her face. He slowly stood up and said, "When you talked about Su Mu, did you ever think that you should not be treated like this? Don't cry, and don't play that trick. Old master wants to protect you, but my words still have some weight. Pack up and go back to the old house. If you continue to say that, there will be no place for you in the old house. A person like old master does not lack people to wash his feet." Chapter 4898. Memorize when Yuan sneered. At this moment, he no longer needed to care about her face. He slowly stood up and sneered. As for Auntie Wang, she was about to vomit blood. If it was someone else, she would have made a scene long ago. However, since it was Wen Yuan, she really did not dare to do so. One of Wen Yuan's younger brothers was doing very well at the top. The one in the Yi clan had retired, so Wen Yuan's status in the entire Yi clan was very high. The old master was also very fond of her. Since Wen Yuan told her to leave, she really had to leave. No matter how indignant she was, she picked up her suitcase and went to complain to the old man. The old man was naturally annoyed. With a wave of his hand, he sent her to the kitchen to do rough work. Such a woman was really too troublesome. On the other side, after Wen Yuan sent Auntie Wang away, he transferred a relatively younger woman to take care of the Cymbidium chinense in the villa. She thought that a younger woman in her 40s would be more capable in taking care of the Cymbidium chinense in the future. Cymbidium chinense was her grandson. She couldn't ignore him all the time. But now, it was better to let Sumu calm down. She had to get used to this kind of thing. Wen Yuan was not helping his son, but most marriages in wealthy families were like this. If there was no love, one had to hold on to it. Sumu had a son. If she educated her son well, why would she be afraid of the future? Wen Yuan understood, but there were some things that she still had to take care of, such as some fox spirits. Xiangnan didn't care, but it didn't mean Wen Yuan didn't care. Auntie Wang was right. Auntie Wang just made Sumu leave in anger. It wasn't to the extent that they couldn't get married. The key was Lin Lu. He clearly saw that it was Sumu's call, so why did he pick it up? Such a woman was simply a scourge. Wen Yuan made a trip to Starlight's headquarters. When the CEO's wife arrived, she was naturally waited upon with great care. At this time, Yi Xiangnan was in a meeting and knew nothing about it. Wen Yuan also didn't allow anyone to inform him. Wen Yuan went to her own office in Star's Entertainment. After the secretary attentively served tea and snacks, Wen Yuan asked subconsciously, "Where is Manager Lin?" The secretary immediately knew which Manager Lin it was and replied softly, "Manager Lin is also in a meeting now." Wen Yuan frowned. "It's a high-level meeting today, isn't it? Lin Lu is only the deputy manager of the PR department. Why is she attending?" The secretary immediately said, "CEO Yi has already promoted Deputy Manager Lin to the manager position." Wen Yuan put the cup in his hand on the table and looked at the secretary quietly. "Ask her to see me." The secretary was stunned and immediately knew that Manager Lin was in big trouble. The news of CEO Yi canceling the wedding spread through the grapevine. It was said that Lin Lu followed him on a business trip and was caught red-handed. The CEO's wife never came to the company. It was not good for her to call Manager Lin the moment she arrived. Hence, the secretary went over and interrupted the meeting. "CEO Yi, Mrs. President wants to meet Manager Lin." "Which Manager Lin?" Yi Xiangnan asked calmly. The secretary bit her lower lip. "Lin Lu, Manager Lin." All of a sudden, all eyes were on Lin Lu. The prying made Lin Lu a little restless. Yi Xiangnan's voice became even calmer. "After the meeting, I'll ask Manager Lin to go over." As soon as he finished speaking, Wen Yuan's voice came from the door. "Manager Lin is so arrogant. It seems that he wants me to invite him in person." As soon as the door was opened, Wen Yuan walked over slowly. Although he was calm, his aura was strong. Lin Lu knew that Wen Yuan didn't like her. At this time, she felt a little uneasy and couldn't help looking at Yi Xiangnan. Wen Yuan sneered. Chapter 4899. Everyone was dumbfounded by Wen Yuan's words. It should be noted that Wen Yuan never asked about the company's affairs. All the big and small matters were handed over to Yi Xiannan to handle. Yi Mubai spent his days traveling with his beloved wife. But now, it was such a big deal. Even when the Qin family and the Yi family broke off the engagement, Wen Yuan didn't have such a big reaction. It seemed that Lin Lu had really touched Wen Yuan's bottom line. From this, it could be seen how important the Cymbidium Chinense was in the Yi family and in Wen Yuan's heart. No matter how mediocre that Miss Su was, no matter how considerate Lin Lu was, in the end, the one with the trump card in her hand would be the final winner. Yi Xiangnan got up. "Mom. I want to talk to Manager Lin. Since Manager Lin doesn't have time, let's talk here." Wen Yuan's voice was calm, but there was an indescribable power in it. Yi Xiangnan had a headache. "Mom, must you say it here? Miss Lin." Wen Yuan ignored her and looked directly at Lin Lu. "I only have one thing to say to you. You may be the book that Yi Xiannan occasionally opens by his bedside, but as long as I am here, as long as Yi Mubai is here, don't even think about entering the Yi family's door." She didn't have any feelings for Lin Lu. If she had behaved herself as her mistress, Wen Yuan would have turned a blind eye to it. It wouldn't have been good for him to meddle in the affairs of the younger generation, let alone Lin Lu. After all, she couldn't control her son. But this woman's behavior had shaken the foundation of the Yi family. Wen Yuan knew that the Cymbidium Chinense was frightened. She hadn't gone to see Su Mu because she wanted Xiangnan to clean up the mess himself. Now, Lin Lu didn't know her identity at all. It was hard for her to see her. After Wen Yuan finished speaking, there was silence. Lin Lu's complexion was particularly unsightly, as if she was about to cry. She had always been a strong woman, but at this moment, she felt very helpless. She looked at Yi Xiangnan. The latter had no intention of speaking up for her. Lin Lu choked, "Madam, I didn't do it on purpose." "Really?" Wen Yuan had always been gentle, but he wouldn't be soft-hearted towards such a foxy woman. "If you do it on purpose, starlight will turn the sky upside down. Do I not even have the right to speak here?" Lin Lu lowered her eyes, not daring to reply. He felt wronged. At this time, Yi Xiangnan walked to Wen Yuan's side and placed his hands on his mother's shoulders, asking her to sit on his seat. He smiled and coaxed, "Mom, look at how hot-tempered you are. Don't get angry so easily at your age. It's bad for your health." Lin Lu's heart thumped. She had never seen CEO Yi coax a woman, not even to her. At this time, he simply ignored Wen Yuan's humiliation and coaxed Wen Yuan instead. Lin Lu's heart was a little cold. She finally realized what kind of thing she was in Yi Xiangnan's heart. She thought that he didn't blame her, which meant that he forgave her and pampered her. She also relied on this pampering to vaguely reveal the appearance of the future lady boss in Starlight. It turned out that everything was her dream. Yi Xiangnan had never thought that the Yi family would not acknowledge her. It wasn't that she didn't know that he had other women. She thought that she was different. After all, she was in Starlight, wasn't she? Lin Lu's heart sank. Yi Xiangnan was still coaxing his mother. After a long time, Wen Yuan left. Naturally, he didn't look at Lin Lu. Chapter 4900. Lin Lu's heart is cold. Sitting there, she feels cold from head to toe. She doesn't even have the courage to look at the man she loves. Yes, she loves Yi Xiangnan very much. She is fascinated by his appearance and power. When there was Qin Yi Huan in the past, she didn't dare to think about it, because Qin Yi Huan can't tolerate it. But Su Mu appears, a woman who is inferior to her in all aspects. Lin Lu thinks that as long as she gives birth to a child, she will be much better than Su Mu in all aspects. At that time, the title of Mrs. Yi will be hers sooner or later. She can bear it, and she can wait. And she will be more competent than Su Mu. She can ignore the gossip about Yi Xiangnan. She just wants to go home. Lin Lu doesn't hide her thoughts very well. A man like Yi Xiangnan grew up in such an environment, so he won't care about it. He doesn't care about Lin Lu. She is just an employee and a warm woman. She never dares to disobey him. She is docile enough. That's why he doesn't care about her this time. In the final analysis, he doesn't care about Lin Lu, but Su Mu is not that important in his heart. As for Cymbidium Chinense, he believes that there will be a long time. After seeing Wen Yuan off, Yi Xiangnan finishes the meeting. Of course, Lin Lu's face is not good, and she has been absent-minded. Yi Xiangnan calls her name several times. This makes Lin Lu a little embarrassed. When Yi Xiangnan walks out, Lin Lu stops him, "Boss Yi." Yi Xiangnan turns his head, "Manager Lin, what's the matter?" Lin Lu knows that many people are looking at her. She shouldn't come out at this time, but she really can't help it. She is just an ordinary woman. Biting her lip, she says softly, "Boss Yi, I want to talk to you." Yi Xiangnan's gaze swept across everyone before he finally said indifferently, "Come to my office in 10 minutes. Lin Lu felt relieved and smiled. Okay. Yi Xiangnan walked out directly, and the middle and upper echelons who stayed behind all turned into gossips and gossiped about what had happened that morning. Mrs. President must be really angry. Of course, my precious grandson is wandering outside. I heard that Miss Su is very unyielding. Yeah, he said he wouldn't get married, and he really wouldn't get married. Unlike some people who were told that they would never be able to enter the Yi family's door, but he didn't give up and even rushed to talk to CEO Yi. It seems that CEO Yi really doesn't care. He didn't even say a word. For men, women are like clothes. If the clothes are worn out, they can be replaced. Of course, wives and children are different. Just watch, I don't know what will happen next. I'm guessing the nightclub will use money to get rid of this one. Lin Lu couldn't take it anymore. She bit her lip and left. She went to Yi Xiangnan's office. The secretary opened the door for her and looked at her strangely. Lin Lu knew that the whole company probably knew about her and Yi Xiangnan. When Yuan gave her a bad attitude today, and many people must be laughing at her behind her back. It's not that Lin Lu didn't care, but she had to endure it. She went in. In the magnificent office, Yi Xiangnan was flipping through the documents. He didn't look up when he heard the footsteps. Lin Lu walked to him and bit her lip. CEO Yi. At this time, Yi Xiangnan looked up at her. Then he opened the drawer and took out a checkbook. He wrote a set of numbers with a golden pen. Lin Lu was stunned. Her lips trembled. CEO Yi. Chapter 4901. Yi Xiangnan pushed the check to her and said calmly, "This is 10 million yuan." He didn't say anything else, but Lin Lu understood what he meant. It was a one-time buyout. Lin Lu had always thought that she was special. She didn't think that the nightclub would give her up after realizing it. So she was stunned for a long time. Yi Xiangnan took back his hand and said calmly, "That's it. You can go out first." Lin Lu came back to her senses and said with a trembling voice, "Boss Yi, do you mean to break up?" Yi Xiangnan looked down and flipped through the documents. He said calmly, "If you think so, I will keep your position. As long as you don't make any mistakes, you can keep up with the business. Lin Lu stood there and didn't go out immediately. After a while, she bit her lower lip and said, Boss Yi, I want to apply for a transfer overseas for 2 years. Yi Xiangnan looked up. Lin Lu pushed the check to him and smiled. I don't want this. Yi Xiannan didn't look at her in a different light at all. He merely furrowed his brows, closed the document in his hand, and looked up at Lin Lu. Lin Lu's lips trembled. If you still make the same decision after 2 years, then I will leave the company. Lin Lu was gambling. She put herself in the most dusty position to please a man. She didn't want to make things difficult for a man. She just wanted a position by his side. Yi Xiangnan looked at her for a long time and said calmly, if you insist, go to Italy. There is a branch company that needs a person in charge. I hope you can make some achievements in 2 years. Lin Lu's eyes were filled with tears. She nodded and said, Boss Yi, I won't let you down. Yi Xiangnan tore the check and threw it into the trash can. Then he said calmly, go out. Lin Lu actually wanted to say something that was similar to love, but Yi Xiangnan obviously didn't want to say anything, so she could only leave. After she went out, everyone in the secretary's office looked at her. Her lips trembled and she walked straight into the elevator. She would come back, she would come back. On the other hand, when Yuan sat in a black limousine and went to Su Mu's place, Yi Xiangnan could ignore it, but as a grandmother, she couldn't. When Yuan left Star's Entertainment and went straight to the place where Su Mu lived. He didn't call, but there was no one at home. Su Mu simply waited downstairs. She sat in the car and asked the driver, old Zhang, to pay attention to the movements outside the car. At about noon, Su Mu came back. She walked back, holding the little Cymbidium chinense in her hand. When Yuan got out of the car, Su Mu slowed down her pace and smiled, Auntie. When Yuan nodded. Where did Cymbidium chinense go? She was a little distressed. Cymbidium chinense's forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. Su Mu said honestly, I went to find a nursery for Cymbidium chinense. I want to work there. When Yuan naturally didn't object to this, but as a grandmother, of course, he had his own plans. The grandson belonged to the Yi family. Su Mu was a good girl. She didn't ask for a penny from the Yi family when she left, nor did she ask for any child support. Xiangnan, the bastard, really treated this son as if he had never existed. She couldn't just stand by and watch. When Yuan raised his chin and said, let's go upstairs and chat for a while. Oh, I haven't seen my Cymbidium chinense for a few days. It seems to be much heavier when I hold it. Su Mu felt that it was inappropriate. Let's talk in the car. Chapter 4902. Su Mu felt that it was inappropriate. Let's talk in the car. How could Wen Yuan not know about her coldness and alienation? However, she acted as though she didn't know and continued kissing the little Cymbidium chinense lovingly. I've talked a lot with Cymbidium chinense. I'm hungry. Is our little Cymbidium chinense hungry? Cymbidium chinense touched its little belly and sneaked a look at its mother. Su Mu couldn't pretend to be dead anymore. She coughed lightly. Auntie, let's go upstairs and talk. I'll cook. Cymbidium chinense is hungry too. When Yuan carried Cymbidium chinense, he was strong and didn't look hungry at all. Su Mu followed behind helplessly. When they got upstairs, she felt a little uneasy. After all, her place was very small and Wen Yuan had probably never seen such a small and simple house. However, Wen Yuan didn't mind at all. He sat on the sofa with Cymbidium chinense and played. Sumu poured a glass of water and placed it in front of her. Wen Yuan was very easygoing. Go do what you need to do. There's no need to call me. I'm Cymbidium chinense grandma and not an outsider. Cymbidium chinense, right? Cymbidium chinense nodded its head vigorously. Grandma is not an outsider. He still liked his grandma. Although his father wasn't good, his grandma was very good. Sumu didn't know what to do with him and went to the kitchen to cook. Wen Yuan played with Cymbidium chinense and taught it some simple counting. Actually, Wen Yuan didn't feel good in his heart. Xiangnan broke off the engagement twice in a row and both times were expected by the elders. The first time was with Yi Huan, who was a good child. The second time was with Su Mu. Although she wasn't very outstanding in all aspects, she raised the Cymbidium chinense well, which made people look at her in a new light. Wen Yuan sighed and didn't say anything in the end. Su Mu spent half an hour making 3 dishes and a soup. It was simple but refreshing. Wen Yuan thought it was great, but he soon remembered that Su Mu was only 24 years old, and she had become a mother before she was 20. Wen Yuan silently ate a mouthful of food. Beside her, Cymbidium chinense looked at her anxiously and asked very slowly, "Grandma, is it not delicious?" Wen Yuan patted his little head lovingly, "Delicious, your mother's cooking is very delicious. Grandma hasn't eaten such delicious food in a long time." Because of this, she was even more impressed with Su Mu. She felt that this girl was a down-to-earth child. While eating, they chatted. "Mumu, what kind of job are you going to find? Do you have any idea?" Su Mu slowed down eating, because Wen Yuan called her a little intimately. "I'm still looking for a job. I took Cymbidium chinense to the nursery today, and I can enter the nursery tomorrow." After saying that, Su Mu took another mouthful of food. Wen Yuan asked about the situation of the nursery in detail. He was relieved to know that it was a public one, so he didn't take Su Mu to change schools for the time being. Then he asked about the job, and Su Mu said that she could find one by herself. Wen Yuan knew that she had an accident before she graduated from college. He felt it was a pity, but he couldn't say anything. In the afternoon, Wen Yuan stayed here for about 2 hours, and then he took Cymbidium chinense out to play. The driver drove out and bought a lot of things. From food to clothing to use, there was a lot of things. But Su Mu could see that they were cheap but of good quality, so she didn't feel burdened. Su Mu breathed a sigh of relief. Wen Yuan didn't eat dinner again, and he was too embarrassed to let Su Mu take care of it again. He just hugged Cymbidium chinense and left. There are 2 more chapters. Chapter 4903. 69 books. Remember to miss Grandma. I'll come to see you next time. Wen Yuan said with a smile, then said to Su Mu, "Cymbidium chinense, if you don't have time, you can send him to our place. Grandpa Cymbidium chinense and I both have time. We miss him too." Su Mu thought about it and agreed. "Thank you, Auntie." Wen Yuan left. When Su Mu was clearing the table, she saw a stack of money on the table. It was about 20,000 yuan. Su Mu's eyes were a little red, and she lost her composure. Cymbidium chinense leaned against her, looking obedient. After a while, he couldn't help but ask, "Did Grandma leave this?" Although Cymbidium chinense was young, it was probably because Su Mu lived a poor life that Cymbidium chinense knew the concept of money early on. He knew that his father was very rich, had a big villa, wore the best clothes, and had a very soft bed. However, none of that warmed his heart as much as his grandmother's company today, and the stack of money that made his mother cry. Cymbidium chinense was very young, but he knew that his mother didn't have it easy, so he was very excited. The little person threw himself into his mother's arms and said very softly, "Mom, you still have me." Since he was young, he knew that he didn't have a father, and his mother didn't bring him to his grandmother's house. They depended on each other. He had seen his grandmother, and she was very bad to his mother. He also had an uncle. Every time his grandmother came over, it seemed like she was asking his mother for money. She said that his mother was useless and shameless, and that she was a disgrace to the Sioux family. Cymbidium chinense keenly felt that he was that disgrace. However, he never dared to ask his mother, because he was afraid that his mother would be sad. At this moment, his mother seemed to be very sad, but also very happy. When Yuan returned to the villa where he lived with Yimubai. To her surprise, Xiangnan and Yi Hui were both there, waiting for her to eat. Yimubai was sitting on the sofa reading the newspaper. When he heard her coming back, he closed the newspaper. "Why did you go out for a day?" When Yuan looked at his son beside him, took off his jacket, and said calmly, "I went to see Su Mu and Cymbidium chinense." Yi Xiangnan's eyes flickered imperceptibly. When Yuan snorted. "It's quite pitiful for a girl to bring her son outside." Yi Hui hurriedly said yes. She hoped that her brother could bring Su Mu back. When Yuan sighed. "Actually, Su Mu is the same age as Yi Hui. She is still a child." As he spoke, he went to the dining table, too lazy to bother with his son. During the meal, when Yuan told him about Su Mu's situation. "In the future, Cymbidium chinense will be delivered here on Saturdays and Sundays. Xiangnan, if you miss your son, come and see him. After all, he is your biological son. You can't just ignore him." Did she complain? Yi Xiangnan said calmly. When Yuan was a little angry all of a sudden. "Yi Xiangnan, do you think everyone is as scheming as your manager Lin?" Yi Xiangnan rubbed his nose. "Manager Lin has been transferred to Italy. You won't see her. Calm down." When Yuan was a little suspicious. "Is she retreating for the sake of advancing?" "All right. The older, the wiser." In Yi Xiangnan's heart, he paid more attention to Lin Lu's ability. Lin Lu was indeed a capable person, so he agreed to her request. Moreover, he did not want to have anything to do with her in the future. Of course, he was not prepared to keep his chastity for Su Mu. Wasn't it normal for a loveless marriage to have some fun outside? He did not feel that he would let Su Mu down. After the meal, Yi Xiangnan and Yi Mubai discussed business matters before leaving. Chapter 4904. Yi Xiangnan returned to the villa. He felt a little tired, so he sat on the sofa and rested for a while. Auntie Chen told him what had happened during the day. Although Yi Xiangnan had already heard about Auntie Wang from Wen Yuan, he didn't mind listening to it again, as if it could relieve his boredom. Auntie Chen repeated it over and over again, and he fell asleep as he listened. Auntie Chen was a little speechless. She looked at him and finally covered him with a blanket. Yi Xiangnan woke up in the middle of the night and found that he had fallen asleep in the living room downstairs. He got up and wiped his face, quietly spacing out for a while. Then, he took out his phone and swiped a photo. It was a photo of Qin Yi Huan, the only girl he had ever liked. He had liked her for many years, but in the end, he lost to Shenting. In fact, it wasn't Shenting, but Yi Huan. After a long time of company, she still fell in love with Shenting. Indeed, children's words didn't count. No one would have thought that Enchanting and Qin Yi Huan got married before Yi Xiangnan, because Yi Huan was pregnant. It was quite unexpected, but not unexpected. After all, Enchanting had waited for so long. It wasn't too early to be a father at the age of 31. Yi Xiangnan received the invitation the next day. He sat alone in his office, a little stunned. After all, she was the girl he had loved all his life. After work, he wanted to pick out a gift. He didn't let his secretary do it for him, but he did it himself. He drove to the largest shopping center in the city and went straight to a jewelry store. He had stored a few sets of jewelry here for his wedding. At this time, he asked the manager to take them out. He picked out a set of pink diamonds, which was priceless and beautiful, suitable for Yi Huan. Yi Xiangnan left with the box, but when he was going to the parking lot on the first floor, he accidentally saw an inconspicuous figure, which was very familiar. He narrowed his eyes, then stood there and watched. It wasn't anyone else, but Su Mu. She was working at the counter of a branded shoe store and was squatting down to try on shoes for the customers. The customer didn't seem to be very easy to serve. He tried on several pairs of shoes in a row and was very picky. Su Mu didn't show any displeasure and still responded with a smile. In the end, the customer didn't buy it. When he got up and left, he didn't even look at Su Mu, who was squatting on the ground to clean up. He even chatted with the people around him. The design of the shoes in this shop is quite silly. The staff looks silly too. Yi Xiangnan was 5 or 6 meters away, so he could hear everything clearly. He frowned and slowly walked to Su Mu's side. This is the life you want. You want Cymbidium chinense to follow you. Even if you sell shoes for a lifetime, you won't be able to bring anything to Cymbidium chinense, he said coldly. Su Mu paused for a moment, then looked up at the man above her head quietly. After a long time, she whispered, Mr. Yi, we still need to do business here, please move aside. Yi Xiangnan said without thinking, I'll buy 10 pairs, if it's not enough, 20 pairs. Come out in half an hour. The store manager was annoyed to see a man pestering Su Mu. Su Mu had just arrived and she was already pestering a rich man. It was quite troublesome. But when he heard it carefully, he realized that it was 20 pairs of shoes. The shoes here were all worth tens of thousands, and 20 pairs were their turnover for several days. The manager changed his face quickly with an attentive smile. Sir, would you like to pay the bill first? Yi Xiangnan stared at Su Mu. What size shoes do you wear? The manager gasped again, thinking that it was a rich man who wanted to pursue Su Mu, so generous. Chapter 4905. So he couldn't help taking another look at Su Mu. She looked so ordinary, but she turned out to be a diamond from South Africa. So before Su Mu could speak, the manager made his own decision. Mu wears shoes of size 7. Sir, you really have a good taste. Mu is gentle and has a good temperament. Yi Xiangnan was speechless. Su Mu couldn't bear it anymore. She didn't say anything and just wrote 20 bills. She was not stupid. If he wanted to buy, she would certainly pay. Yi Xiangnan had spent more than 300,000 without batting an eye. 10 minutes later, they were sitting in a coffee shop in the mall. He was dressed in a dignified manner, while Su Mu was still wearing the uniform of a shop assistant. She wore a black dress suit, and her hair was tied into a bun. Luckily, she was thinner, and her clothes were not ugly. However, it was a little out of place for her to sit with someone like Yi Xiangnan. Su Mu lowered her head and kept stirring the coffee in the cup without saying a word. Yi Xiangnan frowned. Are you going to keep doing this? Squat here and sell shoes for others. What's wrong with that? Sumu looked up at him. Or does Mr. Yi feel inferior? Yi Xiangnan stared at her. You are the mother of Cymbidium chinense. Even Cymbidium chinense doesn't feel ashamed. Why does Mr. Yi feel ashamed? Mr. Ye's future wife is decent enough. As for me, Mr. Yi doesn't need to worry about it. Really? He said in a cold voice, do you want Cymbidium chinense to grow up to be like you, an ordinary person living in that kind of house and even doing inferior work in the future? Sumu tried his best to suppress his anger, shame, and resentment. Her little face was tight, and she whispered after a long time, Mr. Yi, you can treat me as a stranger. A stranger. He seemed to be pondering these words, and then he laughed softly. I do remember that not long ago, we seemed to have been husband and wife. His method was a little frivolous and a little nasty. Sumu thought back to that night when he was taking a shower and Lin Lu was in his room. But now, he could still talk to her like they were husband and wife as if nothing had happened. Sumu calmed herself down. That's the thing that disgusts me the most. As she spoke, she suddenly stood up and prepared to leave. She would feel sick if she spent another second with him. Yi Xiangnan reached out and grabbed her. He narrowed his eyes and said, Is it disgusting to be my wife? That's not how you expressed yourself the other day. You remember being happy. Sumu didn't know what she was thinking at that time, or how angry she was. In short, she slapped Yi Xiangnan in public. The Honorable CEO of Starlight. Yi Xiangnan was probably a little stunned as well. His handsome face alternated between red and white, and there were clear fingerprints on his fingers. He glared at the woman in front of him. Are you crazy? Sumu was probably furious and felt that it was not enough, so she directly poured the coffee on his head from head to toe. She ran away before Yi Xiangnan could catch her. Yi Xiangnan had never suffered such a loss. He just stood there, his whole body wet, and the coffee kept falling from the ends of his black hair. At this time, some onlookers actually recognized that this was the CEO of Starlight. Immediately, someone took a photo and posted it on WeChat Moments, Weibo. They immediately imagined a story of a domineering CEO and Cinderella. However, no one could have imagined that the Cinderella just now was the female lead who gave birth to a dragon. In less than half an hour, the popularity was fermented, and the #1 trending topic on Weibo was hashtag the woman that the CEO of Starlight couldn't get. Chapter 4906. 1 second to remember. In less than half an hour, it became the most popular topic on Weibo, hashtag the woman that the CEO of Stars can't get. The picture was of Yi Xiangnan with coffee dripping from his head. At the same time, Yi Hui saw it. She sat on the sofa and laughed like a pig, then said, Mom, come and see, my brother kicked an iron plate. When Yuan immediately went over and was shocked at a glance. Xiangnan had suffered a big loss this time. Who did it? She asked curiously, not feeling sorry for her son at all. Yi Hui was still laughing, and when Yuan guessed, could it be Sumu who did it? How could this child be so bold? She didn't feel sorry for her son at all. Yi Hui smiled and said, she even slapped him in the face. When Yuan also smiled and shook his head. I didn't expect that. Yes, sister-in-law looks gentle and quiet, but how could she be so fierce? Yi Hui was in a very good mood. When Yuan looked at her and said, you're happy, but don't show it in front of your brother. He's still a virgin now. Then he said with infinite yearning, maybe no woman dares to treat him like this. Yi Hui laughed like a pig again. On the other side, Sumu returned to the counter. The store manager asked her all kinds of questions happily, but Sumu always politely changed the topic to something else. Later, she couldn't avoid it, so she simply went to the warehouse to prepare shoes. Yi Xiangnan spent so much money to buy 20 pairs of shoes, and she wouldn't wear such expensive shoes. She was going to adjust them to Yi Hui's size and then send them to him. Just after she finished, the store manager ran in with her mobile phone, looking a little flustered. Sumu, don't tell me you did this. She pointed at Yi Xiangnan on the screen and held her breath tightly. The CEO of Stars Entertainment. Slapped in the face. Spilled coffee. And the female lead was a shop assistant in their store. Did they give Sumu the courage of a leopard? Suddenly, the manager saw another piece of news and was dumbfounded. Sumu, you gave birth to a child for CEO Yi. They were supposed to get married, but Sumu refused to get married. God, is this brain damaged? Instead of marrying Boss Yi, she came here to sell shoes. Was there something wrong with her? The manager put his hand on Sumu's head. He was still confused for a long time. Sumu's voice was indifferent. It's all in the past. There's nothing to talk about. The manager said with disappointment, are you stupid? CEO Yi obviously came to you because he still has feelings for you. You have to seize the opportunity. I also know that men from rich families are a bit fickle, but if it were me, as long as I have money, it's okay for my husband not to come home every day. Sumu smiled faintly. It won't be like this when the time comes. When your life is worse than that of a servant, you might as well sell shoes here. The manager didn't give up and asked in a low voice, you really don't want that splashing wealth? No. Sumu put the shoes in place and said in a low voice, I'm going to deliver the shoes. The manager didn't understand. These are given to you by Mr. Yi. I don't want his things. Sumu said softly and then moved the shoes out one by one. She called a taxi and the manager moved them together with her. After all, they sold 20 pairs of shoes today and it was beneficial for everyone. But she just felt that Sumu was a little too straightforward. Perhaps this kind of character was really not suitable for rich families. Actually, there's nothing wrong with selling shoes, right, Sumu? The manager patted her shoulder and comforted her. Sumu smiled. Yes. Chapter 4907. When Sumu gets in the car, the manager still says, in short, whether you like him or not, it's better for you to control your temper. He is a big shot that we can't afford to offend. If it were not Sumu today, but another woman, she probably wouldn't be able to live in this world. Sumu understands it in her heart, but she was really angry at that time and couldn't bear it. Now she calms down completely and feels that what she did was wrong. She gets in the car and nods, Sister Chin, I know. I won't be so impulsive in the future. Sister Chen nods with satisfaction and watches the car drive away. After more than half an hour, the car stops at the door of Yi Xiangnan's villa. When Sumu moves the shoes down, Auntie Chen has already seen it. She immediately runs over and whispers, Miss Su, why are you here? Mr. Yi is very unhappy and embarrassed when he comes back. Sumu is quite gangster, Auntie Chen, please move these in together. Auntie Chen looks at these shoe boxes and is surprised, oh, Miss Su, why do you have so many shoes? How can you wear them all? Sumu whispers, it's none of your business. Anyway, Mr. Yi bought them. Auntie Chen helps her move them and whispers, Miss Su, you are also cold to Mr. Yi. Do you still call him Mr. Yi? Don't we sleep together? Sumu turns her head and looks at Auntie Chen with some words, I have broken off the engagement. Auntie Chen seems to be possessed by Auntie Wang today. She says with pity, that's a loss. As for how it is a loss, Sumu knows in her heart. Isn't it the same thing? She doesn't say anything else and sits down to do her own things. However, Yi Xiangnan was in the living room. It was broad daylight, but he was not in the company. Logically speaking, there should be a changing room in his office. At least, there should be regular clothes. However, he was sitting on the sofa with a gloomy face, just like what Auntie Chen had described. Sumu didn't want to see his face. She put the things in the corner and said, Mr. Yi, I have changed the shoes you bought to Miss Ye's size. You still dare to come? He asked her. Sumu was a little scared, but she didn't want to pay attention to him. She bent down and wanted to leave. The door is closed. You won't be able to leave. Yi Xiangnan got up and turned his head away. Auntie Chen, you, go back and rest. Auntie Chen stood there. It's not time for me to rest yet. Then I'll give you a week off with pay from now on. Let's see if you still want to poke your nose into this. Aunt Chen immediately ran away like a wisp of smoke. When it was quiet around, Sumu stared at Yi Xiangnan. What do you want? Nothing. Apologize. He sat there with a gloomy face, playing with a delicate mug in his hand. Sumu probably understood that he waited for her at home on purpose. He knew that she would send the shoes to him. So she said coldly, Mr. Yi, I'm sorry. Yi Xiangnan smiled coldly. It sounds insincere. With that, he put down the mug in his hand gently, got up and walked towards Sumu step by step. Before Sumu reacted, he had caught her wrist. Tell me, do you want to attract my attention? He squinted at her. You just want to know that I'm at home. You've seen too much. Sumu struggled for a while, but failed. Instead, there was a circle of red marks on her wrist, which was a little frightening. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.